Hi everyone, welcome to 1% Crime. I know you can't sleep, so I'll accompany you with crime stories that happened all over the world. Before we get to the story, tell me where did you hear it from? And if you like this content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's jump straight into the story. The Inman family projected an image of perfect harmony to those on the outside. They were regular churchgoers every Sunday to Orwood Portsing. Yet within their tight-knit circle, one could fathom what really happened behind closed doors. Back in 3, William and Sandra Inman's paths crossed at church. He was 18, she just 16. Their union received their parents' blessing, leading to marriage. The couple made their home in the modest community of Logan, located in Hocking County, Ohio. Bill Inman possessed strong religious convictions and balanced his job in construction with playing musical instruments for the Sky of Faith Evangelical Church in Nelsonville, Ohio. Sandra took on the role of managing the household. In 1984, they were delighted to welcome their son, William Jr., to distinguish between father and son. The head of the family was called Bill, while the younger one was known as Will. As time passed, William Jr. grew up. At age 17, in 2001, he met a 15-year-old named Summer Cook at church, quite reminiscent of his parents' encounter. Will and Summer maintained a friendship for 3 years before getting married when Summer turned 18 in 2004. The newlyweds began their life together by residing with Will's parents in a spacious house in Logan, Ohio. In that same year, when Bill reached the age of 39, he envisioned himself as a spiritual guide. Transforming his garage into a makeshift sanctuary, he began hosting gatherings there. Despite local skepticism towards this self-declared minister's actions, his enigmatic garage started to attract neighbors first, then their friends, and more individuals seeking solace through prayer and leaving offerings. By 2005, Will and Summer were overjoyed with the birth of their son Alex. Around this time, financial strains began affecting the Inman household, since Bill's religious endeavors were not financially rewarding. This situation led the family to consider relocating to another state in pursuit of better employment opportunities. By 2006, the Inman family had fully resettled in Florida. Both Bill and Will promptly secured employment in hotel construction. Meanwhile, Sandra and Summer dedicated themselves to homemaking and nurturing young Alex. 2 years later, the Inmans made their way back to Ohio from Florida. By then, they had forfeited their Logan home due to an inability to reclaim it, and settled in a rental in Vinton's countryside. Starting a new chapter shortly after their relocation, in 2008, Will and Summer welcomed their second child, a daughter named Kelly. By 2010, their family grew with the arrival of another daughter, Alana. As young parents, Will and Summer often sought weekends away for relaxation and rejuvenation. During these times, Bill and Sandra, always supportive, took on the role of caring for their grandchildren. The weekends were filled with joy as they cherished moments with their 3 grandchildren. In the spring of 2010, Bill Inman secured a pastor's license and proclaimed himself the head of the Skinnier Faith Church. Alongside his wife, he established a charitable entity named Ranch of Mercy to assist the jobless and homeless. His vision was grand. He wanted to construct a large dwelling for orphans and widows. However, financial resources were quite lacking. To address this issue, Bill conceived a lottery scheme. Each participant would purchase a ticket with proceeds earmarked for building the shelter. The grand prize was either a house or $200,000 plus 99 other significant rewards. The community became aware of this lottery through news and advertisements. Bill initially promoted it door to door, assuring participants of lavish rewards while emphasizing that surplus funds were destined for providing a haven for the destitute. Priced at $10 per ticket, Bill managed to sell 100,000 tickets, amassing $1 million for the project. The drawing was set for September 2010. In June 2010, personal upheaval struck the Inman family when Summer expressed her desire to divorce Will after 6 years of marriage. This declaration came not long after she had penned a significant entry in her personal diary. "I am utterly exhausted from constantly trying to please everyone around me. Do not deserve happiness. Do I not have the right to love someone and feel that love in return? I'm uncertain if now is the appropriate time, but I feel compelled to share everything with Will. It troubles me deeply, yet he deserves to know the truth. He should be aware that I no longer wish to be with him. I need to be alone to rediscover myself and understand my current identity. At this moment, I feel like a servant, perpetually running around and obeying others' commands. I adore my children with all my heart and would never trade them for anything. However, I don't want them to grow up witnessing their mother merely following orders all the time. I'm unsure how Will might react to this revelation. There's a chance he could become angry, attempt to take the children away, or worse, resort to threats or harm. It's important for our children to see us as equals. I'm aware that Will's parents might turn against me and try to convince me to stay, but such actions won't change anything. Last night, when Will asked me what I wanted, my mind was blank. All I could think of was what I don't want. I don't want to feel unhappy and trapped any longer, but I couldn't bring myself to voice these thoughts. So instead, I sat there in silence. Every day feels like a battle. All I yearn for is rest, to cry and sleep without interruption. But finding a way out of this situation seems impossible at times. My hope is that by the time of my next journal entry, I'll have clarity on how to resolve everything. As the summer progressed, we moved forward with the divorce proceedings. Departing from the Inman residence, I took our son and both daughters along with my personal belongings. We sought refuge at my parents' home. Wanting not to disrupt the children's relationship with their father or grandparents, visits were scheduled regularly for them. 2 months following our separation in August 2010, I began a relationship with Adam Peters while also securing employment at a bank in Logan's downtown area, working in a cleaning capacity duly, to limited educational background. When September arrived, it marked another significant event, the Ranch of Mercy's house raffle, spearheaded by the Inman family. Although construction on the prize house was supposed to begin, both September and October passed without any progress. No raffle took place, and no explanations were given. The organization didn't seem to rush to refund participants either. By December 1st, 2010, the Inmans got a notice requiring them to leave their rented residence due to significant unpaid rent. In response, Summer and Adam went to collect her remaining belongings from the Inman home. However, they were denied entry. This led Summer to call the police, reporting that her estranged husband was intimidating her and preventing her from retrieving her possessions. When the police arrived, Will and his parents continued to block access. Will even escalated matters by threatening Adam and clashing with an officer. Consequently, Summer filed a legal complaint against Will. She reflected on their relationship, recalling how idyllic it seemed before marriage, but lamenting its drastic change afterward. Will's behavior reportedly became very controlling, affecting everything from her diet to household responsibilities, and even intimate aspects of their life. She wasn't allowed to sleep without his approval, and was confined at home without access to her phone or keys. Summer revealed Will's aspirations for a large family, his interest in polygamy, and his activities on related websites, including posting inappropriate images. She also disclosed threats he made if she pursued divorce, and mentioned how her cats mysteriously disappeared. Will attributed their disappearance nonchalantly to them escaping through an open window. Following Summer's allegations, Will provided his version of events. He justified taking Summer's phone and keys by suggesting he suspected her of infidelity. Regarding the cats, he said that due to their wild behavior and damage caused to furniture and family members, he relocated them to a shelter. As a result of these conflicts and accusations, Will was subjected to a restraining order, preventing him from approaching Summer, and faced penalties and probation amidst further investigations. A fierce battle for custody emerged between the families. The Inmans filed police report against Adam Peters, labeling him a potential threat to the safety of Alex, Kelly, and Alana. Tragically, Summer's life took a dark turn. On the night March 22nd, 2011, Summer Mann, just 25 years old, was finishing her shift at the bank. She wrapped up her cleaning duties after the office had closed. Around 11 p.m., she stepped outside to dispose of the trash. Summer had texted her partner Adam to meet her after work, but he didn't find her by 11:30 p.m. Worried, Adam arrived at the bank and began his search. He discovered her personal items scattered near a dumpster in an alley, her phone, keys, and a music player still playing with headphones nearby in the grass. Her jacket lay there too. Alarmed, Adam immediately contacted Summer's parents to inform them of her disappearance, and stressed the need to alert the police swiftly. Initially, Summer's parents called the bank, guessing she might have stayed longer for extra work and misplaced her belongings. Security personnel had no clues about her whereabouts. They then contacted Logan police to report Summer missing, emphasizing her punctuality and that she rarely stayed late at work. Police arrived at the scene, where they found Summer's belongings. They heard accounts from 3 eyewitnesses who saw her abduction about an hour earlier. Two women out for an evening jog reported seeing Summer as she threw out the trash. At that moment, a white Ford Crown Victoria driven by a blonde woman approached. Two individuals dressed in black balaclavas exited the vehicle and forcefully grabbed Summer, shoving her into the back seat despite her resistance and cries for help. One bystander's attempt to intervene was thwarted when the female driver incapacitated him with pepper spray, forcing him to retreat. The car quickly left the area. The two jogging witnesses immediately headed to the nearest police station to report what they had witnessed. Their account initially faced skepticism from the police, who found their narrative peculiar and doubted its authenticity. Expecting it might be a fabricated story, the police reached the abduction site of Summer Inman just an hour after her parents filed the missing person report. However, initial efforts did not lead to locating the missing 25-year-old. News of Summerman's kidnapping quickly circulated through all local media outlets, capturing the community's attention. Hundreds of Logan's residents united in a concerted effort to locate her. As 3 days elapsed, the possibility of finding Summer safe and sound grew increasingly faint. Throughout this harrowing time, her parents endeavored to maintain hope against despairing thoughts. Shortly before her disappearance, Summer Inman shared a photo on Facebook featuring herself, her new partner Adam, and her children. The image portrayed them as a content family unit, while Inman, who had access to Adam Peters' Facebook page, surprisingly still on his friends list despite being Summer's current partner, noticed this update. It raises an intriguing question. Why would a husband befriend his wife's new companion? The backstory revealed that Adam, a man without stable employment, had been hired by the Inmans a year earlier, in spring 2010, for various household tasks. It was then that Adam and Summer crossed paths and developed a bond. Despite initial reluctance, Summer eventually reciprocated Adam's affections. Her diary entry reflects this internal conflict. When I looked into his eyes, I realized that the devil had taken over me. I didn't listen to what God was telling me. I tried to stop. My mind screamed, "Run, get out of here now." But instead, I stayed and let him embrace me, and then delved deeper. I am very sorry about this. I am guilty. This encounter signified the unraveling of Summer's life within the Inman family. Yearning for happiness and love, she initiated divorce proceedings which were prolonged 5 days before vanishing. Will tested the proposed spousal support per child monthly, suggesting a reduction to $50 given his annual earnings of just $6,000. Will and his parents sought full custody of the children, but their petition was rejected by the court. After losing contact with their grandchildren, Bill and Sandra visibly deteriorated. They lost weight and were clearly affected, as those who knew them concurred that the grandchildren were the light of their lives. In March 2011, amidst the investigation into Summer's disappearance, the Inman family was located. They were found at the residence of Bill's 70-year-old mother in Jackson, Ohio. Bill, Sandra, and Will collectively asserted their ignorance regarding Summer's abduction. The Inmans recounted that on the night of Summer's kidnapping, they were en route to Cleveland to view a new property. However, they encountered car trouble after 3 hours on the road, leading to an overnight ordeal of vehicular repairs on the roadside before returning to Logan the next morning. They maintained that their interactions with Summer were generally amicable with infrequent disputes. Yet they attributed a shift in their familial harmony to Adam Peters' employment in their household, describing this phase as challenging. The trio consistently portrayed Adam as a negative influence, alleging he was the catalyst for the disintegration of their previously harmonious and tightly knit family. The investigation took a crucial turn when police noticed a white Ford Crown Victoria at the Inman family's residence. Upon inspection of the vehicle, a GPS receiver was confiscated. Subsequent examination revealed that on March 22nd, the day Summer was abducted, this car was in Logan. The GPS was deactivated at 5:30 p.m. that evening and reactivated the next morning again in Logan, contradicting the Inman's claim of traveling to Cleveland. Phone records further corroborated that all 3 family members were in Logan on both March 22nd and 23rd. Additional inquiries revealed that on the morning of March 23rd, around 7:30 a.m., the Inmans were at a car wash engaging in a thorough interior cleaning of the vehicle. Bill, Sandra, and Will were all present, but Summer was notably absent following this event. They visited an auto shop in Cleveland for a tire change. While there, a shop employee noticed something odd. Bill was choosing to replace nearly new tires with used ones, simply because he didn't like his current set changed. There was also evidence that the Inmans attempted to modify the car's appearance. Notably, Bill had removed a police spotlight that had previously been mounted on the driver's side door next to the mirror. Bill, Sandra, and Will Inman were apprehended and brought in for interrogation. Prior to their arrest, Bill assured his elderly mother of their innocence, attributing the situation to a test from the devil. Throughout the questioning, they consistently claimed they were unaware of Summer Inman's abduction and didn't know who the kidnapper was. However, after several hours and faced with the possibility of capital punishment if convicted, Sandra Inman's resolve faltered. Eventually, she disclosed the truth. Sandra confessed that they were responsible for Summer's abduction on the night of March 22nd. She detailed how Bill and Will had disguised themselves in black masks. Sandra admitted that her initial plan was merely to abduct and intimidate Summer. However, events took an unexpected and tragic turn. According to Sandra's confession, when Summer was forcibly placed in the car's back seat, Will restrained her with plastic ties around her neck, hands and feet, intending merely to frighten her into granting him access to their children. As the situation escalated, Will realized that Summer was on the brink of unconsciousness. He panicked and desperately searched for a knife to release her, shouting frantically to his mother, "Oh my God, Mom, where's the knife? I can't find it." Amidst their collective fear and desperate search for the knife, the situation worsened. Summer ceased breathing and tragically passed away. Sandra maintained that their objective was never to take Summer's life. They merely sought a resolution to their custody dispute and hoped to ensure regular visits with their grandchildren. On March 29, 2011, a week after the kidnapping, Sandra Inman disclosed the location of the body. Summer's remains were found in a septic tank on the grounds of Skinnier Faith Church near Nelsonville, about 30 kilometers from her workplace. Bill Inman had been involved in the church's construction. This place held personal significance for him and Sandra, as it was where they had married 28 years earlier. The Inmans were regulars at this church. Bill participated in its musical ensemble. Police uncovered the well by removing a concrete slab and unscrewing 6 bolts from the metal lid. When they opened it, they immediately saw Summer's legs. She had been thrown headfirst into the septic tank, still wearing her work attire. Her black t-shirt bore an ironic inscription, "I don't have anger issues, I have issues with idiots." A forensic examination confirmed that Summer had succumbed to strangulation. Apart from marks on her neck, hands and legs indicating she'd been restrained, no other injuries were found on her body. This highlighted strangulation as the cause of her tragic demise. Sandra revealed that she originally planned to dispose of the body in a river, but reconsidered and decided it would be safer to conceal it in the well near the church. She believed this location would ensure it remained undiscovered for a long time. Sandra admitted to feeling deep shame for her actions and their irreversible consequences. During the subsequent trial, 49-year-old Bill Inman and 28-year-old Will Inman did not take any responsibility for Summer's death. Throughout the proceedings, they stayed mostly silent, showing no visible emotions and avoiding eye contact with Summer's grieving parents. Sandra Inman, at 47 years old, stood out as the only family member who accepted responsibility for her part in the tragic events. She maintained that the plan to intimidate Summer was entirely her own idea. In a deeply emotional moment before sentencing, Sandra, overcome with tears, faced Summer's parents and begged for their forgiveness. Her speech, though broken by sobs and a quivering voice, clearly expressed remorse. Sandra admitted she saw Summer as a daughter and regretted her catastrophic decision. In 2012, the verdict was handed down. All 3 members of the Inman family were convicted. Bill and Will Inman received life sentences without the possibility of parole. Sandra Inman also got a life sentence, but with eligibility for parole after serving 15 years. However, among friends and church members familiar with the family's dynamics, doubts arose about Sandra being the mastermind behind the crime. It was commonly known that Bill had a dominant role in the family and usually made final decisions on all matters. Will, on his part, was seen as a pampered child whose desires were always met by his parents. Those close to the family speculated that Sandra's confession might have been a strategic move to reduce legal consequences for her husband and son. Currently, Alex and Alana are being raised by Summer's family. For quite some time, it was hard to explain to these grandchildren where their mother, father, grandmother, and grandfather had gone. Max received an urgent call from his close friend, Jonathan Hoffman, on May 18, 2012, at 5 p.m. Both were seniors at Farmington Central High School in the affluent West Bloomfield area near Detroit, Michigan. Their friendship began in ninth grade during an English class and was sparked by a mutual appreciation for Tupac, one of the most influential figures in American hip-hop. Jonathan confided in Max that he had recently failed a court-mandated drug screening. He had been on probation since authorities found a prohibited synthetic substance in his vehicle 2 months earlier. Jonathan expressed concern over his grandmother Sandra's intense anger towards him. At 17 years old, Jonathan had been living in his grandparents' apartment for 9 months following his parents' divorce and their relocation to Arizona. Initially, Jonathan went with his parents to Arizona. However, shortly after their arrival, the family was dealt a severe blow when his younger sister Jessica was diagnosed with a benign brain tumor. This necessitated multiple surgeries and ongoing medical care. Adapting to a new school while coping with his sister's health issues left Jonathan feeling unhappy and despondent. Jonathan was overjoyed when his grandmother Sandra suggested he return to West Bloomfield and stay with her until he completed high school. The prospect of reuniting with friends and familiar surroundings excited him. Nevertheless, not everyone approved of the arrangement between Jonathan and his grandmother. Jonathan's father Michael, a prominent attorney for many years, had observed some disconcerting traits in Sandra's personality. 74-year-old Sandra Lane, a retired educator and mother of 5, could be stern. While she cherished her grandson deeply, along with her 85-year-old husband Fred, the situation presented its challenges given the teenager's yearning to reconnect with friends during what should have been a stable final year at Farmington Central High School. Jonathan's father eventually conceded, allowing him to thrive once again at Farmington High School. There, he was recognized as the class clown, an exceptionally intelligent student and a tech whiz. He had secured a full scholarship to Eastern Michigan University. His peers saw him as a spirited, cheerful, and optimistic individual. That's why Jonathan's call to Max caused such alarm. He didn't sound like himself. His voice carried not only concern, but also palpable fear. The friends decided to meet up later that same day, and Jonathan promised he'd text within the next 30 minutes to confirm the time. Max waited for the message, but 40 minutes passed with no word from his friend. Growing impatient, Max decided to call Jonathan directly. The phone rang, and rang without any response. Unbeknownst to him at the time, Jonathan would never be able to reply again. Just before this incident, around 5:20 p.m., the West Bloomfield Township Police Department received an emergency call from Sandra Lane's residence, Jonathan's grandmother's home. The young caller informed the dispatcher he had been shot and struggled for breath over those 3 minutes. He begged for help, stating that he was on the brink of death. The assailant had already fled the scene without seeking aid. The subsequent events were even more horrific. The emergency dispatcher listened as Jonathan frantically called out for help, before several gunshots rang out again. His screams of pain were followed by faint words that he was dying. Then came a short silence, before a woman's scream echoed through the line, leading to an eerie quietude. By about 5:30 p.m., West Bloomfield police arrived at Sandra Lane's condo, in the serene Maple Point gated community, a neighborhood known for its low crime rate and predominantly inhabited by retirees. A resident had reported hearing gunshots in this typically peaceful area. As officers disembarked from their vehicle onto the neatly kept lawn, they headed into what would become one of their most chilling calls yet. Another gunshot reverberated from within the residence. Before the officers could make their way inside, a woman appeared at the front door, the officer's instructions to disarm herself. She was a small elderly woman with fading red hair, her clothes spattered with blood. With her hands raised in surrender, she informed the officers that she had just taken her grandson's life. This revelation stunned the officers, yet it paled in comparison to what awaited them inside. As they entered the condo, the officers were confronted with a ghastly scene. Blood and smudges were present in nearly every room. Bullet impacts marred both walls and furnishings, and empty shell casings littered the ground. Near the entryway lay a discarded 9mm Glock 17 semi-automatic handgun. Subsequent forensic analysis would uncover additional magazines for the firearm, hidden within the residence. On the upper floor, police found 17-year-old Jonathan Hoffman sprawled face down in a pool of blood. He suffered from multiple gunshot wounds across his chest, arms, back, and stomach, indicating that many shots were fired at close quarters. Emergency medical personnel swiftly transported him to Botsford Hospital, clinging to hope they could save him. Sadly, By 6 p.m., Jonathan succumbed to his injuries. Sandra was taken to the closest medical facility as a precautionary measure. Medical professionals conducted various examinations to confirm her well-being. The next day, Sandra Lane faced charges for her grandson's homicide and was detained without bail while awaiting trial for either first or second-degree murder. Her guilt left to be determined by a jury. Throughout this ordeal, she maintained her innocence. News of this incident plunged Jonathan's family, friends, and neighbors into deep sorrow and shock. They all pondered what could have driven Sandra to turn a firearm on her dearly loved grandson. The news of this tragic event spread rapidly through the tranquil neighborhood, with media outlets speculating on various theories. Whispers suggested that Jonathan had failed a drug screening test. Journalists highlighted a narrative involving two neglectful parents who left their substance-dependent teenage son in the care of elderly grandparents. Based on the grandmother's testimony, it was revealed that at the time Jonathan's passing, he had an illegal synthetic drug in his system, which had previously caused him complications. His death shortly after another sensational incident involving hallucinogen consumption. Just 2 weeks prior, another youth under the influence of drugs assaulted his family with a baseball bat, resulting in a fatal event. Takia Cipriano and his accomplice consumed a prohibited substance before attacking their parents. Sandra Lane's attorney argued that she had legitimate concerns for her safety due to managing a young man on probation who was difficult to restrain. It was widely reported that this particular drug could induce aggression in users. If an incident similar to Takia's had occurred at Sandra's residence, could her actions against Jonathan be justified as self-defense? This was the reasoning Sandra provided to both the police and jury. She asserted that since Jonathan's return to West Bloomfield, he had become unruly and exhibited aggressive behavior. Sandra claimed that he rarely left the house and mingled with teenagers addicted to dangerous synthetic drugs. Sandra also stated that Jonathan's parents did not inform her about his addiction before his arrival and showed little concern for his activities during his stay. Michael, Jonathan's father, was portrayed as having abandoned him. Jonathan frequently had fits of rage, destroying objects and damaging furniture in his room. When upset or during disputes, he would lash out, even breaking his own possessions like his computer monitor and phone. Authorities confirmed that Jonathan had a history with illegal substances. On March 17, 2011, he was apprehended and penalized for possessing hallucinogenic drugs. Subsequently, in court, he received a 93-day deferred sentence along with a year of probation and the requirement for random drug screenings related to these substances. Jonathan's acquaintances shared with law enforcement their concerns regarding his drug habit and their efforts to redirect him away from it. Sandra exerted considerable effort to assist Jonathan in reforming his ways, focusing on his academic performance and adhering to her guidelines. Nevertheless, he resisted these attempts, displaying defiance, erratic behavior, and occasional aggression. Fred confirmed that from the moment Jonathan arrived, there were continuous and intense disputes between him and Sandra. She even contacted the police multiple times due to Jonathan becoming utterly unmanageable. She sought assistance from the school as well, but all efforts proved futile. Sandra recounted an incident where Jonathan, under the influence of drugs, lost complete control. This situation necessitated hospital staff to restrain him to a gurney. The elderly woman implored his parents for help, however. His father remained indifferent and did not return to Michigan. Gradually, Sandra began fearing for her safety. She confided in her husband about her concerns regarding their grandson and his disreputable associates. In a bid for self-protection and to safeguard her elderly husband, feeling cornered with no other option, Sandra acquired a Glock 17 pistol for defense in case Jonathan or his friends became aggressive. On the critical morning of May 18, 2012, Lane took Jonathan for a drug test that returned positive for illicit substances. Jonathan was instructed to undergo another test later that day. Upon receiving another positive result, he became furious while in his grandmother's vehicle. He resorted to swearing violently, kicking the dashboard and at one point, seizing the steering wheel, compelling Sandra to halt the car multiple times. Jonathan even attempted to snatch the car keys at one juncture. Upon their return home, the confrontation intensified. Apprehensive that he might be incarcerated, Jonathan decided to flee immediately to Arizona. He demanded $2,000 and the car keys from his grandmother. She complied with neither request. When Grandpa Fred took the dog for a walk, Sandra felt overwhelmingly frightened and attempted to pacify the teenager to no avail. She retreated to her bedroom and retrieved the loaded pistol, hoping it would compel her grandson to heed her words, or at least acknowledge her presence. Upon returning upstairs to Jonathan's bedroom and finding him in the bathroom, instead of heeding her, the boy hurled insults, kicked her in the abdomen, and struck her on the head. A struggle ensued, during which Sandra discharged the firearm. She then fled to the basement in a state of panic, seeking refuge. After a while, she ventured upstairs to check on him, only for her grandson to assault her once more, attempting to wrest the gun away. In the ensuing she shot again in self-defense. This narrative paints a picture of elderly individuals trapped in a dire predicament that tragically culminated in Sandra shooting her beloved grandson out of genuine fear for her own life. However, questions remain as to whether Lane's account is entirely accurate. As the investigation deepened, a contrasting narrative began to surface, one that was still tragic but considerably more concerning. Initial claims by Sandra regarding Jonathan's alleged violent nature didn't align with the experiences of those who knew him personally. Contrary to portraying him as aggressive, interviews revealed that at school, Jonathan was known as humorous and peace-loving. He was always quick to diffuse conflicts with his humor and intelligence. Friends also testified that they hadn't observed any recent changes in his demeanor. Furthermore, Jonathan was described as having a very lean build, standing at just 1.67 meters tall and weighing merely 50 kilograms, hardly fitting the profile of a physically intimidating person. His stature was notably similar to his grandmother's. It appeared that instances of Jonathan's so-called rage were exclusively reported by Sandra, a claim now met with skepticism. Fred, Sandra's husband, acknowledged witnessing heated arguments between his wife and grandson. Despite being present at home almost all the time, there was never any physical violence. Sandra played a key role in overseeing Jonathan's education, establishing strict expectations which the teenager had difficulty meeting. Fred even suggested sending Jonathan back to his parents in Arizona. However, Sandra rejected this proposal, contradicting her claim that the boy was unmanageable under her care. Jennifer, Sandra's daughter, told the police that during the 9 months Jonathan stayed with his grandparents, he maintained daily communication with her and visited them monthly. Throughout this period, Sandra never reported any issues between her and Jonathan, nor did she express feeling overwhelmed by his presence. When Jennifer learned about Jonathan's legal troubles involving illicit substances, she discussed possible solutions with her mother. She considered either rehabilitation or sending him back to Arizona. Sandra convinced her that she could handle the situation independently. Reluctantly, Jennifer agreed to leave her son in her parents' custody, a decision that would later prove tragically significant. Authorities were summoned to the Lane household on 2 occasions. The first call came in March 2012 when Jonathan himself dialed emergency services. He was distressed after consuming magic mushrooms and experiencing severe paranoia, fearing for his life. Upon arrival, police noted that he showed no aggression but was terrified upon seeing them. He eagerly embraced one officer before being secured to a stretcher for his protection and transported to a medical facility. Just 4 days after this incident with magic mushrooms, Sandra Lane reached out to 911 again. She reported that her grandson was enraged and attempting to flee, while Jonathan informed the dispatcher that his grandmother was forcibly trying to confine him in her vehicle. When officers arrived, they encountered Jonathan vocally berating his grandmother. The law enforcement officials then proposed intervening with the irate youth. Sandra opted to handle the matter herself. This episode was recorded in the police files as a routine verbal dispute between a guardian and a child, which was settled amicably. However, for the detectives leading the investigation, this case increasingly seemed less about a rebellious teenager spiraling out of control and more about a woman enforcing her authority over a defiant child. The hearing on April 12th regarding the possession of prohibited substances and subsequent probation had evidently enraged Sandra. She believed she could discipline her grandson effectively. Up until that point, Sandra had been resolute in steering Jonathan onto the correct path. Yet, as graduation neared and her opportunities dwindled, this mission began to look like a failure. In that moment, Sandra faced many choices. She could have contacted her daughter or sent Jonathan for rehabilitation. Instead, she acquired a semi-automatic pistol and took several shooting lessons at a firing range. Determined to prevail in this conflict and assert control over her unruly teenage grandson at any cost, for days after Jonathan was placed on probation, Sandra Lane applied for a license to carry a firearm. On April 18th, she purchased a 9mm Glock, explaining to the store owner that she needed it for home protection. She chose a weapon intended for lethal force, along with ammunition containing expanding bullets designed to inflict maximum damage. After buying the pistol, Sandra trained at the nearest shooting range until she felt proficient in handling it. She kept her newfound expertise hidden from her husband, who remained unaware of the gun's presence in their home. He was quite taken aback when he discovered how much his wife had managed to achieve covertly. On the fateful day of May 18, 2012, Sandra and Jonathan returned home at around 5 p.m. Sandra then requested her husband, Fred, to take their dog for a walk, and insisted that he remain outside until she gave him permission to return. Their outdoor time extended for so long that both homeowner and dog grew weary. They ended up sitting together on the grass watching a basketball game. As Fred Wayne, the grandfather of the deceased high schooler, recounted during an interview when they heard police sirens, he failed to grasp the situation. Why did Sandra want Fred to leave them? It seemed less like the action of a woman fearing for her life, and more like someone with a plan, intent on carrying it out without interference or witnesses. If Jonathan was as agitated as described by his grandmother, it's unlikely Fred would have left them alone. However, more compelling evidence against Sandra was yet to come. At that same time, 5 p.m., Jonathan was talking with his friend Max about their evening plans. Max informed the police that Jonathan's tone wasn't angry or excited. Instead, he sounded frightened. He was worried about failing a drug test and anxious about his grandmother's reaction. Jonathan mentioned that Sandra was so furious, she threatened to send him back to Arizona. Sandra claimed her grandson violently assaulted her, striking her in the head and abdomen before she discharged the firearm. Medical personnel from the nearest hospital examined her immediately after the incident, but found no injuries or bruises. Ballistic evidence revealed Sandra fired the weapon more than 10 times throughout various locations in the house. 6 bullets struck Jonathan. 2 shots were aimed at his back, indicating he attempted to flee from Sandra. Another shot struck him in the abdomen while he was wounded and conversing with a 911 dispatcher. The police were convinced it was Sandra chasing Jonathan, not the other way around. The grandmother sought to punish her grandson for his perceived wrongdoing while he sought refuge. At some point, she descended to the basement to reload her pistol, likely when Jonathan ascended to his to call 911, and subsequently returned, shooting him at close range while he lay on the floor bleeding. The final conclusive blow against Sandra's claims of self-defense came from the toxicology report. According to the report, at the time of the shooting, Jonathan's bloodstream didn't contain any prohibited substances. Only a metabolite of a harmful drug was identified in his urine. The forensic examiner clarified that the residual traces discovered in the urine indicated that all substances had left his body and had no impact on Hoffman's behavior. In other words, Jonathan was entirely lucid when Sandra opened fire on him. Consequently, the jury dismissed the defendant's self-defense claim. On March 19, 2013, Sandra Lane was convicted of a serious crime against her grandson, Jonathan Hoffman. Prior to sentencing, the elderly woman expressed regret for her actions, pleading for understanding. She claimed that her intention had not been to take the teenager's life, but rather to help him resolve his issues together. Meanwhile, her daughter Jennifer urged for the harshest punishment for her mother. She asserted that Sandra Lane was utterly malevolent and would undoubtedly repeat her actions if given the opportunity. Jennifer depicted her mother as a monstrous and obsessed individual fixated on academic achievement. She firmly believed that everything Lane had stated in her statement was falsehoods. She concluded by stating that her son now resided in heaven, a place where Sandra would never have access. Lane received a minimum sentence of 20 years in addition to a mandatory 2-year term for utilizing a weapon in the commission of manslaughter. Her lawyer had pleaded on her behalf, citing concerns about her potential survival during an extended prison confinement. Jonathan's funeral occurred on May 22, 2012, with approximately 700 people who had known and cherished the young man in attendance. They fondly recalled moments spent with him and cherished him as a cheerful individual who never failed to bring laughter to those around him. As a grandson, Jonathan fell short of his grandmother's expectations, ultimately leading her to conclude that he did not belong in this world. Jordan chased Zara for about half a mile with a shadow of persistence and evil. Zara, unaware of the danger, continued on her way without suspecting that evil was already approaching. Suddenly he appeared out of the darkness like a ghost, grabbed her by the neck with one hand, and covered her mouth with the other, so that the girl would not scream. He blocked her breathing, and then dragged her into the thicket of the forest, where darkness and inhumanity awaited the victim. There, in a forgotten corner of the world, hell descended on Zara. He forcibly invaded her body, her soul, leaving only a scream of pain and horror that was lost in the darkness of the night. Despite her desperate attempts to resist, her cries remained unanswered in the ruthless void. This whole nightmare, this terrible aggression lasted for 9 whole minutes, which seemed like an eternity for Zara, who felt fear and hopelessness. Then, as if nothing had happened, Jordan walked back to his house, leaving behind only traces of destruction and an absolute nightmare. But what if all this was just the beginning of an even more eerie and mysterious story? What if the hidden truth about what happened that terrible night turned out to be more confusing and dark than it seemed at first glance? Secrets hidden in the shadows of the past can destroy not only lives, but also destroy all that remains of hope and peace in this world. Only by digging deeper one can find the answers, but there are even more questions hiding behind them. In the winter of 1986, Zara Alina was born in the vast landscapes of Great Britain. She was the first of 5 children of a single mother, a young woman who mysteriously moved her life from the Pakistani slums to this corner of the UK, back in 1968. Zara embodied the hopes and dreams of her parents, and her birth was an important event. She was the first granddaughter of Radha Parvan, and it brought her a special status in her community. From early childhood, Zara was surrounded by relatives who raised her to a pedestal, showering her with tenderness and care. She grew up surrounded by numerous generations, studying at a unique school of life where the rules were written in blood and betrayal. Despite their lack of finances, Zara's parents invested everything in their daughter's education, believing that she would be able to find everything she needed for a successful life. Their dreams were strong, their hopes were stronger, but in this world of dark streets and hidden ambitions, Zara's life was in danger, hanging over her like a dark cloud. From early childhood, the fire of passion and hunger for life burned in Zara's heart. She dived into the world of tap dancing, where every movement, like a note in a symphony of passion, gave birth to beauty and harmony. Swimming was another passion of her soul, allowing her to escape from the gray everyday life and feel the wave of freedom. She always dressed exquisitely, as if creating a work of art from herself, embodying her dreams in every outfit, but that was just the beginning. When she skated for the first time, she felt new breath of freedom in her soul. Skating became not just a hobby for her, but a way of breathing, a way of expressing the deepest essence of her soul. Among those who knew Zara, no one was surprised to hear that she dreamed of becoming a lawyer. Her heart was full of desire to protect and help others, because she was that bright ray of hope in a world full of evil. Her friendly nature sparkled with joy which was contagious, like a fire in the dark. Her gaze and sparkling eyes promised miracles, and her black curly hair seemed to have been created to tempt fate. Her image was full of charm, like a magic potion mixing passion, kindness and courage in an extraordinary cocktail of attractiveness. Already in her teens, she had the opportunity to travel around England and visit museums and galleries. She showed big interest in art and culture. These trips became an indicator of how independent she was. Later, trips to the rest of Europe followed. This was a clear confirmation that she inherited the desire for adventure from her relatives. It seemed she was following in the footsteps of her Aunt Farah, who, unlike the rest of the family, chose Portugal over the UK. It was fascinating for a young woman to see the work of her aunt, who worked as a psychotherapist in women's organizations. Zara visited her several times. After graduating from high school, her aspirations began to be realized when she got in the University of Westminster. Since then, she worked hard to achieve her goals while taking care of her mother and grandmother at the same time. Her tiny figure was full of a passionate soul and unstoppable energy. Her sense of justice and equality was not limited to the walls of the lecture hall. On the contrary, the generous and caring Zara supported refugees fleeing violence and sought to give a voice to those who had less power. She also participated in volunteer work in community canteens to help the homeless. In general, she had a special habit of noticing the needs of others and always including them in her schedule. Zara was an easygoing girl. Her Aunt Smyranes lived nearby, and she often visited her several times a week. While preparing for the exams, she asked her aunt to help her to study, but they always ended up laughing. Zara left a trail of joy behind her everywhere she went, as those who knew her at that time claimed. In addition, she was hardworking, covered all her expenses, and helped her family. She worked at a local clothing store and knew everyone in the area, from teenagers to the elderly. She always greeted everyone with kindness and was willing to help if necessary. The young girl could talk for hours, but it did not affect her ability to listen carefully to others. Her generosity extended to all living creatures, and she especially loved cats. Sometimes she spent her own money to take stray cats to the vet, take care of them at home, or persuade neighbors to take them in. Her friend Sanji Naira described her as radiant, and believed that her main gift was the ability to share optimism. When Sanji was in a bad mood, he turned to her for help. In Zara's life, there was a bright star whose name was engraved in the very depths of her heart, Carissa Peters. They were not just friends, but companions in the struggle for justice, for protection of women from violence and abuse. Their shared hobbies, especially in the field of women's rights, and it was the connecting thread that carried their friendship through difficulties and trials. Zara and Carissa were so close that they seemed to share the same soul. They easily entered each other's house, as if they were their own shelters from the storms of the world, or talked on the phone almost every day, discussing the news, their thoughts, and plans for the future. In 2002, after successfully passing the exams and completing her internship in law field, Zara had the opportunity to work in the Crown Prosecution Service. It was an important step and an integral part of her dream to become a full-fledged lawyer. To do this, she worked tirelessly, even when her studies were interrupted by worries about her mother and grandmother, as well as financial difficulties. This step was important not only for her, but also for Carissa and for those who believed in her, who support her on this stormy journey to a bright future. On her first day at her new job, Zara couldn't help but be happy. She sent a smiley selfie to her friends and family, as if announcing to the whole world her new era of life. It wasn't just a new job, it was the last piece in the mosaic of her dreams. She had been coming to this for so long that she could hardly believe in her own happiness. Working as an administrator might seem a secondary post, but for Zara, it was a giant step towards her goal. At the age of 35, she realized that a new stage in her life was beginning, and this made her heart beat with extraordinary force. It wasn't just a working day, it was the beginning of a new era, an era when she felt fulfilled and happy. The new job strengthened her confidence in the fact that it was time to create her own family. She dreamed of her children, how they would be happy and protected, how they would live in a world filled with love and harmony. At that moment, Zara realized that every new day was a step towards her happiness, a step towards her dream of having her own family. With such an active life between work, volunteering, friends, and the attentive care of her mother and grandmother, with whom she lived in a separate room when necessary, Zara loved to walk. She liked to move freely. She didn't bother with small things. She could easily put a pair of shoes in her bag to change them for sneakers when needed. Zara believed that a woman should be able to move freely without any obstacles, and even more so that no one should have deprived them of this right. But near her house, there was a man whose existence completely took away this woman's right. His name was Jordan McSweeney. He was a few years younger than Zara, and it was unknown where he was from. One Saturday evening, when the sun had already set below the horizon, Zara was going to meet a friend. Even though she was not in the mood, she decided not to cancel the meeting. Zara's word was as strong as steel, and she always stuck to her promises, not allowing her mood to dictate her actions. Her devotion was as steady as a rock, and she was ready to walk through thick and thin for the sake of her friends. Before leaving, Zara picked up the phone to talk to Aunt Farah. But this time there was a certain anxiety in her voice that did not go unnoticed. Her aunt asked her to be careful, and Zara realized that even if she wasn't going to go far from home, the world around her seemed strange and unpredictable that evening. But she stubbornly told herself that she knew every dark corner of the city, and her name was known to everyone who had ever looked at her. But something about this evening made her heart beat faster, and Zara decided to be more careful. At the appointed time, she met her friend at a local bar called the Ilford Big Spoon, located on the West End of London. Ilford is a lively and diverse London area, an ideal place for dinner and gatherings, so the girls visited this place that Saturday evening. Then they went to another bar, and there Zara drank a couple glasses of water. At the same time, Jordan was having one drink after another at another nearby nightclub. An idea was forming in his mind, and he refused to resist it. He intended to find a woman to attack that evening. Surveillance cameras recorded how Jordan met women at the entrance to the club, hugged them without their consent, and tried to kiss them. He was particularly persistent with one of the employees, despite her obvious reluctance. He was kicked out of the club a little after 23 o'clock, and his inappropriate behavior remained recorded on cameras. When he came out, his actions were recorded by cameras as he walked along Romford Street towards the park. Seeing the woman walking, Jordan followed her and approached her closely, although she tried to avoid him by entering the store he was waiting for her outside. When the woman cautiously left, Jordan followed her again, then he walked down the other side of the street, leaving her in sight. However, when the woman entered her house, Jordan had no choice but to continue on his way. According to the surveillance camera's data, at about 2 a.m. on Cranbrook Street, Jordan noticed a woman approaching him. Suddenly, he quickened his pace, approaching her, but on the video you can see that two passing witnesses noticed Jordan's strange actions. Despite the man's suspicious behavior, the woman returned home safely, leaving Jordan surprised and annoyed. He returned to Cranbrook Street without success. At this time, Zara and her friend, deciding to return home, left the bar. When it was 2 a.m. a friend took a taxi, preferring convenience, while Zara, given the short distance and good weather, decided to walk. They parted, and Zara headed down the residential street of Cranbrook, which is a 10-minute walk from her house. That's when Jordan noticed her. According to the Chief Inspector Dave Williams, Jordan had a clear intention. He was going to attack a woman that night, regardless of the location. Cranbrook Street remained busy even in the early morning hours. There was a constant flow of traffic. At the age of 13, Jordan had already been sentenced in Kent Juvenile Court for various offenses committed between 2006 and 2009. In August 2010, when he was 17 years old, he was found guilty of assaulting a girl, leaving her with a swollen eye, and he was given a 4-month detention and correction period. 11 years later, he attacked another woman, and he was again banned from approaching a woman, this time for 3 years. During this time, he had no right to contact her directly or indirectly. By 2010, Jordan had 28 convictions for 69 crimes, including theft, assaults on police and the public, criminal cases, theft of motor vehicles, traffic violations, committing crimes with bail, and shoplifting. On his page on a well-known social network, he bragged about having a huge collection of weapons and, in general, extolled a criminal lifestyle to the sky, posting different photos and quotes. He also posted fake pictures saying that the FBI was looking for him. On June 17, 2022, he was released on parole after being sentenced to prison for criminal damage, racially aggravated harassment, and illegal carrying of a bladed weapon. One of the conditions was meetings with a parole officer. Jordan settled into a van on St. Valentine Street, in a 130 acres park in the south of Gun Hill, the largest green space in London's Redbridge district. He again violated all agreements and, true to his criminal background, missed not one but 2 meetings with a parole officer. As a result, the authorities refused to give him the advantage. The parole service began the procedure for returning him to prison on June 22, 2022, but they did not immediately inform the police, but only 2 days later. Early on Saturday morning, June 25th, police visited Jordan's mother's house to arrest him and found an unpleasant surprise. He was not there. Around 2:30 a.m. on June 26, 2022, the streets of Ilford witnessed a terrible crime. Zara was found on the sidewalk with signs of abuse on her body. Her belongings were scattered, as if the mess in her life was embodied in the streets. Her body was bruised, her clothes were torn, and her eyes showed struggle for survival. A woman passing by immediately realized that the situation was extremely serious. Without hesitation, she began to give Zara a closed chest massage and do CPR, trying to give her the last hope of survival. But the injuries inflicted on her body turned out to be too serious. Even with all the help of passers-by and emergency medical help, it was too late. Zara fought for her life, but the severe wounds and brutality of the crime were too strong. At 9:58 a.m. on Sunday, she passed away, leaving only the painful traces of a struggle behind. At that time, at about 11 a.m. in the park, Jordan, recorded by security cameras, was getting rid of evidence, throwing out his clothes. With his indifferent and cold-blooded demeanor, it became clear that this was not a random act of violence. The police responded quickly and knocked on Zara's grandmother's door, asking her to identify her granddaughter from the bar's video footage. When she confirmed that it was her, the police finally explained to her what had happened. Zara's uncle, Kasi Molina, called the rest of the family, including Aunt Farah, to tell them what had happened. In Portugal, Her aunt, crying, remembered the call on Saturday night. After she broke the news to her children, Farah immediately flew to London. The family was in shock, trembling with horror. It was difficult for all of them to eat, sleep, or talk. Although they hardly dared to mention Zara's death, they also could not think of anything else. Meanwhile, detectives immediately began investigating the area where Zara was found. One of the first steps was to collect video footage from surveillance cameras to track the attacker's movements. This, along with the bloody fingerprints left near the scene, allowed them to identify Jordan. They then tracked his location using a video surveillance system. After receiving images of the main suspect, Inspector Dave sent an officer to Gun Hill to check if anyone else recognized Jordan. The operation was successful, and almost immediately they found Jordan sleeping in his van. The authorities immediately arrested him. Confused and stunned, Jordan had no resistance during the arrest. Clothes and shoes stained with blood were found in his trailer, which Jordan was trying to get rid of. Despite many hours of interrogation, Jordan remained silent, refusing to reveal his name or give details of his life. At the same time, new video footage continued to appear, allowing police to reconstruct the chronology of events. The crime led parole officer Justin Russell to highlight a number of errors in the treatment of Jordan. It was noted that Jordan had been a criminal since the age of 16, both in and out of prison, which made him a risk criminal. He had been a high-risk criminal since the age of 16, but it turned out that he had not been treated appropriately. They should have taken more urgent measures to return him to prison after he missed scheduled supervision appointments upon release from detention, but they didn't do it. On Wednesday, June 29th, through a press release read by the police, Zara's family expressed how shocking the last few days have been. Logically, for them, it was an irreparable loss. Nevertheless, they stressed that the warmth and kindness shown by people were valuable to them and served as evidence of the strength of their beloved Zara's spirit. The family had a lot to do, and they needed to find strength. Aunt Farah communicated with the media and met with the police. Despite the shock and grief, her family, especially her aunt, taking into account her own experience in this field, knew that it was necessary to control the situation and protect Zara from accusations from certain media. On July 1, 2022, a preliminary hearing was held in the Jordan case, and on September 30th of the same year, a date was set for a hearing to prepare testimony in the trial. However, on the day of the scheduled trial, Jordan did not show up due to a positive test for COVID-19, and the hearing had to be postponed. On Saturday, July 2nd, a memorial service was held in memory of Zara, organized by her family, which took place on the way to her home, symbolizing the last journey that never ended. At this service, many of those present were dressed in white, symbolizing a silent walk. The event was attended by a coalition of more than 120 organizations specializing in supporting women, expressing solidarity in the fight against violence. It was one of the many groups that worked with Zara Alina's family. As they stated in the media, they demanded justice and taking responsibility. Additionally, they asked to focus on what they considered a priority and key issue, to resist violence from men, and to stop the acts of violators. At a preliminary hearing before the investigation at the East London court in Walthamstow, crime scene investigator Nadia Persut said she believes there is reason that local police officers could and should have taken more action to find Jordan before his attack on Zara. Consequently, she expressed the opinion that juries should resolve this issue. In addition, this investigation should have included the actions of the staff of corrections facilities for probationers. According to Nadia, this process was supposed to last a month. On November 16, 2022, Jordan also did not appear at the hearing, despite being told that this was mandatory. Thus, the meeting was organized via video call. This time, he pleaded guilty. Prosecutor Oliver Glasgow then described him as extremely unfit candidate for bail. This opinion was also supported by Judge Chima Grove. As for the verdict, the judge postponed it until December 14th of the same year. Approaching this date, Jordan again refused to appear in court. But even this did not prevent Jordan from being sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum sentence of 33 years in prison for the murder of Zara Alina. The accused and his representatives filed an appeal, and the sentence was reduced to 33 years in prison. The judge stated that the fact that Zara was unconscious, did not feel anything, and did not suffer, reduced his sentence. Just 4 months later, it became known that Jordan had an intimate relationship with a woman who worked at the Belmar Correctional Service in South London, but was not a direct employee of the prison services. The Metropolitan Police later announced that a 32-year-old woman, whose identity was not disclosed, had been arrested and was under investigation on suspicion of misconduct in a public office. As for Zara Alina's family, everyone remembers Zara with love and pride. They still miss her. For her part, Aunt Farah continues to speak out against violence against women and girls. In March 2023, she joined a march organized by various groups seeking to draw attention to the issue and raise awareness. The protesters marched through the commercial district of West London to Trafalgar Square. Among various slogans, they stated that the lack of action against male violence is equal to abuse by the state. The tragic loss of Zara Alina has only added dark shades to this bloody picture of violence that consumes the hearts and minds of those who seek to change the world. Hi everyone. My name is Jack, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sheila Labar, a monster with an angelic appearance. Psychological and physical traumas received at an early age can have a very unpredictable effect on adult life. Of course, far from always they lead to the fact that a person becomes cruel and seeks to hurt others, but sometimes it is the trauma can give rise to a real monster. Criminal psychologist Adrian Raine believes that there are genetic and psychophysical mechanisms that can turn a person into a cold-blooded killer, about which he wrote in detail in his book, Anatomy of Violence. History knows a lot of serial criminals who had a truly hellish childhood, and perhaps to them can be attributed our heroine today, Sheila Labar. This woman had an angelic appearance which she skillfully used, seducing her victims and then brutally murdered them. Despite the fact that the court was able to prove only 2 of her crimes, criminologists are sure that there were many more. And now let's look at this difficult story from the beginning and try to understand whether Sheila Labar was a born monster or became him as a result of the cruelty that she faced in childhood. Who is Sheila Labar? Sheila Labar was born in 1958, the 4th of July, in the small country town of Fort Payne, Alabama. She was the youngest of 3 children of her parents and was raised with her brother and sister Lynn. Her childhood was spent in a picturesque but rather secluded place, on a farm nestled among cornfields. According to the memories of Lynn's older sibling, Sheila was an active, inquisitive, and open-minded girl with a creative streak. She liked to be in the center of attention, had a good voice and cute appearance, so perhaps, if her life had turned out differently, she would have become a famous actress or singer. But instead of bright posters, her name decorated the pages of criminal chronicles. The unimaginable cruelty of her father. The head of the family, Manuel Bailey, for many years suffered from alcohol addiction, although it would be more accurate to say that his addiction suffered from his entire family. He often went on binges, turning into a real beast who enjoyed abusing his wife and children. He insulted and humiliated them, beat them with anything that came to hand, could throw everyone out in the middle of the night in a downpour of frost, and locked himself in the house, not letting anyone inside. Mothers, daughters and sons often had to spend the night in a barn or in the open air in the field. One day, when Manuel was once again in a drunken rage, he began throwing dishes and other objects at his family members. The mother tried to cover the children as best she could, but one of the flower pots thrown by her husband hit her youngest daughter Sheila in the head. Sheila suffered a serious concussion and a lifelong scar on her temple, which she painstakingly covered with her hair. But not even the insults and beatings were the worst thing that the sisters had to endure in their parents' home. According to the memories of Sheila and Lynn, Manuel, from an early age, forcibly inclined them to intimacy. The mother may have been aware of what was going on, but the subject was never broached. However, despite the nightmare at home, Sheila did well enough in school. She dreamed of leaving the farm as soon as possible and go to conquer the big city. The girl was quite ambitious and determined. She passionately wanted to realize her childhood dream in life and become an actress or pop singer. And she had everything for this. Charisma, bright appearance, and a beautiful voice, adulthood, first marriage. Barely Sheila was 18 years old. She left her parents' home, but adult life was not so joyful. To enter the university, she was not allowed to average score, and to move to the big city, she simply did not have the money. Then Sheila got a job as a maid in one of the hotels, where by that time her older sister was already working. It should be noted that Sheila had a slender figure and a very attractive appearance. She had big blue eyes, a charming smile, and a mop of thick long hair. She was surrounded by attention from men, and over time she learned to use it and manipulate her suitors. In the late 70s, Labar, then Bailey, met a guy named Jonathan Baxter, and a romantic relationship began between them. Jonathan was not yet 20 years old at the time, but he already had a young daughter from a previous relationship. However, the child did not become a hindrance, and soon the couple got married. However, this marriage lasted only a few months and collapsed after Jonathan learned that the young wife abused his daughter while he disappeared at work. Jonathan did not organize scandals and listen to explanations. He just filed for divorce and put his wife with his belongings outside his house. He never wanted to see or hear from her again. After the divorce, Sheila dated various men and mostly lived off them, but all these relationships were fleeting and lasted from a few weeks to a couple of months, until in the early 80s she met her future second husband, Ronnie Jennings. The tumultuous romance soon led to marriage, and Sheila took on a double last name, Bailey Jennings. It was an unhealthy relationship between two irascible and unstable people who regularly cheated on each other, scandalized, and even fought. Still, their marriage lasted more than 3 years. In 1984, after another family quarrel, Sheila demanded a divorce from her husband, but he refused her. In fact, Ronnie did not hold on to the relationship at all. He just wanted to piss off his wife and make her mad, and he succeeded. Sheila became hysterical, took a large number of drugs in front of her husband, drinking strong alcohol, and after this infernal cocktail, sat behind the wheel of the car and rushed down the road. Naturally, soon Sheila, under the influence of pills and alcohol, lost consciousness, flew off the road, and at high speed crashed into a tree. She miraculously survived, but suffered a massive head injury. She spent more than a week in a deep coma, and doctors made no prognosis. When Sheila finally regained consciousness and gradually recovered, she was transferred to a psychiatric hospital where she spent several months. She later complained to her sister that one of the orderlies was constantly harassing her and possibly taking advantage of her helpless state when she was heavily sedated. After all this, Sheila returned to her second husband's home, but began to behave not just aggressively, but threateningly toward him. When during another scandal she attacked Ronnie and poked him in the chest with nail scissors, Ronnie, fearing for his own life and health, filed for divorce and hurriedly moved out of the mad woman. Rich lover. When the second marriage was dissolved, the young woman began looking for lovers through the dating columns of the print media, and she left her ads there as well. But no man did not stay with her for long, because Sheila tended to dominate everything, rigidly suppressing their partners, both in intimate and everyday life. Soon the photo of an attractive girl in the dating section drew the attention of 60-year-old Wilfred Bill LaBar. The man had previously been married twice and had adult children and grandchildren from previous marriages. He was widowed a few years ago and had been living alone on his large country ranch ever since. Bill was a fairly wealthy man. He had a chiropractic office in Epping, New Hampshire, and on the ranch he raised horses. At the same time, he was very lonely and needed a strong, powerful woman. In fact, that's exactly what he found. Sheila was attracted by the wealth of her new acquaintance, and she decided that it would be an ideal union for her. And to make Bill completely lost his head, she began to send him a postal mail, frank letters, supplementing them with her nude photos. The trap worked, and soon LaBar invited a charming pen pal to visit his ranch. Their romance developed rapidly. An elderly man is not stingy on expensive gifts for a young mistress, and in the summer of 1987, she moved to live with him. This has incredibly flattered the doctor, who now went out in public with a beautiful companion who was half his age and was fit for him as a daughter. Nevertheless, he did not plan to marry Sheila. However, Sheila, not waiting for a marriage proposal, changed her name, calling herself LaBar. Bill was surprised by this turn of events, but he did not object. Sheila began to interfere in all the affairs of her elderly lover, starting to control his business, finances, and disposition of his property. In addition, Bill was getting older and could not satisfy the intimate needs of a young woman. Then, according to Sheila herself, he allowed her to meet other men, whom she often brought directly to their home. One of Sheila's regular lovers, closer to the mid-90s, was a Jamaican national named Wayne Ennis. He was much younger than Sheila, and was initially hired as an au pair on the ranch. But soon the young man, with Bill's consent, which was probably given under pressure from Sheila, moved to live in the owner's house. In 1995, Sheila and Wayne officially legalized their relationship, and the spouse considered that from now on he would be the couple continued their relationship online. Sherry sent photos of ultrasounds and her growing belly. "I just bulged out my belly. Jerry wanted to believe it so badly that I had no doubt he would see the pregnancy even if it wasn't there, Miller would later say. Soon, on November 5, 1999, Jerry Cassidy received an email, presumably from Bruce Miller, in which he wrote that he knew about everything and would not let the bastards be born. A concerned Jerry tried to contact Sherry. Hours later she texted him herself, informing him that she had to leave for a few days and that she would text him later. The next day, Jerry received a message from Bruce and learned that he had forced his wife to have an abortion. Attached to the letter were photos of a battered Sherry. I remember standing in front of the mirror, trying to draw bruises on my stomach, Sherry would later recount. Jerry had reached a tipping point. His children, not one but two twins at once, had been killed by Bruce Miller. He was again devastated and full of anger. He blamed Bruce for the deaths of his 3 children and the abuse of the woman he loved. After reconnecting with Sherry the next day, November 8th, Jerry said he couldn't go on like this. He would kill her husband. The couple set about devising a plan to kill him. They worked out routes, parking spots, and even the best place and time to get to the dump. Jerry then made the long drive from his home to Michigan. That same evening, as Bruce planned to leave work, he received a call from Sherry and, following the plan, asked if he could pick up a pizza on his way home. Distracted by the conversation, Bruce did not notice a man approaching him from behind, pointing his 20-gauge shotgun at him and pulling the trigger. After committing the crime, Jerry went home and Sherry began the next part of the plan. She called Bruce's brother, Chuck, said she was very worried about her husband's long absence, and asked Chuck to drive to the junkyard and see if everything was okay. When Chuck got there, he found his brother dead on the floor, in a pool of blood. He had been shot in the chest with a shotgun at close range. According to eyewitnesses, when Sherry learned of Bruce's death, she began screaming and crying. The crime scene was quickly discovered, but no trace or evidence of the suspect remained. Detectives learned that Bruce carried large amounts of cash, and they initially thought his death may have been the result of a botched robbery, as the dead man's wallet was missing. John Hutchinson, a friend and employee of Bruce's who had recently borrowed $2,000 from him, came under suspicion. Police questioned Hutchinson, searched his home, and confiscated weapons. John adamantly denied involvement. The search was inconclusive, and despite the fact that Hutchinson failed a polygraph test, he was eventually released. A theory of murder, due to falsification of vehicle identification numbers, was considered. However, none of the options did not give any leads, and soon the case was closed. Meanwhile, according to Bruce's sister, Judy Miller, Sherry's behavior did not fit most people's idea of a grieving spouse. 2 days after the death of her supposedly beloved husband, she was already dancing in a bar in Otisville, Michigan, and looked happy. 2 weeks later, she had a boyfriend, and it wasn't Jerry Cassidy but a local delivery boy named Jeff Foster. The goal was accomplished. It was like Sherry had passed a level in a video game, and the former lover was no longer interesting. Jerry thought that after the murder, he would be with the woman he loved. After all, he killed for her. But that didn't happen. She began to distance herself, and a month after the murder, she moved her new boyfriend, Jeff Foster, into the house she used to share with her husband, and completely severed her relationship with Jerry, leaving him devastated. It was probably at this point that Cassidy realized he had murdered an innocent man in cold blood. Naturally, Sheila chose an occupation to her liking. She became an operator of intimate phone services. Since she had a truly enchanting voice, men fell for the bait and offered to meet her in person. Among such guys was Kenny County, who at the time of their acquaintance was barely 24 years old. The young man was attractive in appearance, very good-natured and open. However, he had a low IQ level, due to which he was very gullible. This was exactly the kind of guy LeBar was looking for. Kenny was very close to his mother, on whom he actually depended, but Sheila, with the help of clever manipulations, managed to break this connection and literally lure Kenny to herself. She made him an unforgettable night of love, and promised that they would be like this all the time. The young man decided that he had met the woman of his dreams, about which he informed his relatives, and then moved to live in Sheila's house. But soon, Sheila showed the guy her true face, having arranged for him a real torture room in one of the rooms. Each time intimacy inevitably turned into a brutal beating or something worse. Kenny's body was covered with bruises, abrasions, scratches, cuts, and burn marks, but he could not leave the house of the mistress, who had completely subjugated his will. Sheila did not allow him to see and communicate with his loved ones, and his family could only guess what was happening to Kenny. The first alarm was raised by neighbors, who periodically noticed the guy and were horrified by his sickly appearance. A few days before his disappearance, a local store clerk took a picture of the young man on her cell phone camera, and later this picture was attached to the case file in court. In the photo, Kenny's condition could be described as deplorable. He was very thin, there were huge bruises under his eye and on his cheek, and his nose was probably broken. Judging by the degree of healing, all these injuries had been inflicted at different times, which suggested that the guy had been brutally beaten for a long time. The contents of his cart were also alarming. He rolled 2 large canisters of fuel to the cash register, as it later turned out, for his own cremation. The store employees were so puzzled, and even frightened by the guy's appearance, that they decided to report him to the police for possible domestic violence. But this time, Sheila managed to get away with it, and they could not charge her with anything. Soon Kenny stopped contacting his family altogether, and when his worried mother arrived at Labar's house, the owner behaved aggressively and advised to leave Kenny alone. All subsequent attempts ended similarly, at which point Kenny County's family filed a missing persons report with the police, indicating that he may be being held forcibly at the country ranch, a home crematorium, and gruesome findings. When police arrived at Sheila's home, she claimed that the young man no longer lived with her, and claimed that Kenny had run away because his mother, whom he was allegedly terrified of, began visiting them frequently. As evidence, Sheila provided an audio recording in which she asks her lover if his own mother had attacked him, and he quietly gives an affirmative answer. It all seemed more than strange, and the very next day, an officer visiting Sheila secured a search warrant for the estate. Sheila had been on the police's radar many times before, and her name had been linked to another mysterious disappearance of a boyfriend. But over the years, Sheila had never been questioned, and her house and grounds had never been searched. When the police arrived, they did not find Labar at home, but they did see several fires burning near the outbuildings. The fires looked strange, and were made of improvised materials, a mattress, fragments of wooden furniture, hay, etc., all doused with a flammable mixture. One of the bonfires had bones in it that clearly looked like human remains. The squad requested reinforcements in the form of forensic experts, reporting all the findings, but that turned out to be just the tip of the iceberg compared to what they discovered next. Almost all over the house were found poorly washed traces of blood. It was so much that it seemed as if there had been a real massacre. It turned out that the blood belonged to at least 3 different people. The bones smoldering in the fire belonged to the missing Kenny, and I remember hearing her scream, "No mommy, no don't go." After that moment, the full implications of what I had done to Bruce, his friends, his family, Jerry, his friends, and his family hit me with full force. They will never see them again. Bruce was a great man, Sherry Miller wrote of her husband. He never hurt me or my children. All he did was love us. He wanted to adopt my children. He just wanted a family. The only man who loved me, and I ordered him killed. In 2022, Sherry gave a public interview to a popular TV station. She admitted that Bruce was not involved with the mob and never abused her. She admitted that she used makeup to fake bruises and faked ultrasound scans to manipulate Jerry. According to Sherry, she didn't do it for the money. She said that she was afraid Bruce would find out who she really was and felt that it would be easier for him to be killed than to learn the truth about her. Sherry admitted that she knew about Jerry's tendency toward depression and the brief case of evidence, but was confident that she would talk herself out of anything and could manipulate the jury and the court. She was so convinced of this that she turned down a plea bargain that could have gotten her 15 years instead of a life sentence. According to Sherry, it took a public story to find peace with herself. It's still very hard for me to look in the mirror realizing what I did. I've been waiting to tell the truth and hopefully get a sense of peace from it. Sherry Miller remains incarcerated at the Huron Valley Women's Complex in Michigan. She is not eligible for parole. Who, in one voice, called her a crazy, unstable, and extremely violent woman. And Wayne Annis, the third husband, said that the ex-wife repeatedly persuaded him to kill Mr. Labar in order to seize his property. But despite the defense's attempts to convince the court that Sheila was insane and in need of treatment, it was proven that she was aware of her actions at the of her crimes. She was found guilty in July 2008 and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of ever being released. All of her appeals were rejected. Sheila is now serving her sentence in Florida at Homestead Correctional Facility. Thanks for watching, guys. That was Jack. Subscribe to the channel and don't forget to click on the bell not to miss new stories. See you soon. Take care. sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Judge Anthony imposed a sentence of 50 years in prison without parole. The parents were broken. One miserable day had taken 2 sons from them at once. The cold-blooded murder of an innocent man, and even a brother, is clearly beyond the bounds of adequate human response. In the biblical story, the brother killer Cain was banished from paradise as punishment. But he solved the problem differently, eliminating the source of his remorse. The events discussed in this video took place in 2007 in the state of Kansas, and although 16 years have passed since then, this high-profile case has yet to come to a conclusion. On January 5, 2007, 19-year-old Jody Sanderholm, who lived with her parents in Arkansas City, went to a dance rehearsal that was held at the college where she was attending. On that day, Jody did not return home and stopped answering her phone. Such behavior was unusual for her, so her parents immediately became concerned and decided to file a missing persons report with the police. Jody Leanne Sanderholm was born September 26, 1987 in Arkansas City to Brian and Cindy Sanderholm. She was the 3rd child of her parents. She had a brother called Jason and a sister called Jennifer. From a young age, Jody was fond of dancing, and although it played a large role in Jody's life, she also did not neglect her studies. She was one of 4 valedictorians in her graduating class. While in high school, Jody was a member of the National Honor Society, a Kansas State Scholar, a Kansas Board of Regents Scholar, and earned the Outstanding Physics Student of the Year award presented by David Steinamitzi. She was a member of the Ark City High School dance team for 4 years. 2 of those 4 years, she was the captain. Jody was a member instructor of Ark City Dance and a Universal Dance Association instructor. After high school, she attended Cowley College where she studied pre-pharmacy. While at Cowley, she was a member of the Cowley Tigerette dance line. In 2007, the population of Arkansas City was about 12,000. Jody's parents, like probably other locals, thought it was a good and relatively safe place to live and raise children. However, after Jody disappeared and the details of what happened to her became known, many began to realize that safety was only an illusion and that the man was the most dangerous beast. On the morning of January 5, 2007, Jody drove her car, a Dodge Stratus, to college for a rehearsal that was scheduled to end at 10:45. After the rehearsal, she intended to return home. Cindy called her daughter's cell phone several times, but she didn't answer, which was highly unusual. Jody always kept in touch with her family, and even if she missed a call, she would call back soon. Cindy had a bad feeling about this. She decided to get off work and go home to see if Jody was all right. When she arrived, she immediately noticed that her daughter's car was not in front of the house, and this only increased her anxiety, because Cindy knew that by this time, Jody should have been back from rehearsal. Upon entering the house and looking around, Cindy realized that Jody had not returned home. Her dance uniform, which she put in the washing machine when she returned from rehearsal, was not there or in the hamper for her dirty clothes. The shower stall was dry, although Jody always showered after dance class. It soon became clear that Jody had no contact with her father or older sister Jennifer either. She had an appointment at noon, to which she never showed up. Cindy and Brian began calling their daughter's friends, hoping to find out where she might be, but after the morning rehearsal ended and Jody left college, none of her friends saw her. That evening, the college dance team was scheduled to perform at a basketball game, with a routine of which Jody was the choreographer. She wouldn't have missed it of her own free will, but she didn't show up either. At about 6 p.m., still unable to learn anything, and without waiting for their daughter to return home, Cindy and Brian contacted the police and reported her missing. Officers from the sheriff's office immediately put together flyers depicting and describing Jody, began to inquire about her last known whereabouts, and put out an APB on the vehicle she was traveling in. The police learned from Cindy and Brian that Jody had a boyfriend she had been dating since high school. His name was Colby Wilson. When contacted by phone, he reported that he had been at his brother's house in Texas for several days. The police quickly ruled him out as a potential suspect because his stay in another state was confirmed. The next day, January 6th, was very eventful. Lori Leglighter, Jody's best friend with whom they had been friends and danced since high school, provided the police with important information. They both enrolled at Cowley College, where they went on to study dance. Lori reported that she left work at Sirloin Stockade in Arkansas City around 10 p.m., Tuesday, January 2nd, and noticed a light blue car drive by the restaurant several times as she left. On her way home, she noticed a car following her in her mirror. "I thought something strange was going on," Lori told the detectives. She decided to see if the car behind her was really following her, so she started turning onto different streets. The driver of the car behind her was doing the same thing, and it really scared Lori. She drove to the local police station and parked next to it, thinking that the stalker would leave her alone. She didn't see him after she stopped, so she drove home again. However, she had to go back to the parking lot near the police station because she saw the car chasing her again. Lori sat in the car for a while before driving home. She told the detectives that she didn't go to the station because she thought it was someone else's stupid prank, but that wasn't really all. On Friday, January 5th, the band Tigerette Dance Line was rehearsing at the college. According to Lori, she and Jody got there around the same time and, as usual, parked not far from each other. Lori spotted the light blue car again. What's more, she recognized the man behind the wheel. It was a local resident, 23-year-old Justin Thurber. Lori did not know him personally, but had seen him several times in the company of his older brother and his friends. Lori and Jody left practice at the same time and were supposed to meet up later, but Jody never showed up for that meeting. Soon, several members of the dance team revealed that they, too, had seen Justin near the college during the past week. He always sat in his car in the parking lot and just watched. Within the first 24 hours of Jody's disappearance, police had driven all over the city, but could not find her car. Arkansas City is surrounded by fields and wooded areas. They brought in a fixed-wing aircraft to search the area from the air. The car was more difficult to hide than a person because of its size, so the police hoped to be able to see Jody's car from the air. It was determined that the last time her cell phone signal was received, it was from a cell tower located near the Kaw Wildlife Area. This is a vast, wooded area along the Arkansas River. At this point in the investigation, only one person, Justin Eugene Thurber, who was identified by Lori Legleader and other members of the dance group, was considered as a person who might be involved in the disappearance of Jody Sanderholm. It is important to note here that despite his young age, Thurber was well known to the police. 3 years earlier, in 2004, he had been charged with illegal possession of banned substances. He eventually received a suspended sentence and was released. 3 months after that, he was arrested for theft and probation violation. In October 2005, he was charged with disorderly conduct. 3 months later, he was arrested for petty theft and again found to be in possession of a controlled substance. On December 31st, 2006, which was just 6 days before Jody disappeared, Thurber was arrested again for theft. That same day, after paying a $3,000 bail, he was free. Having had a merry New Year's Eve, the next day, January 1st, he began impersonating a police officer and disrupting public order. When the real cops came for him, Thurber complained of chest pain and was taken to the hospital instead of the station. Why he was not arrested after his discharge from the hospital remains unclear, nor is it quite clear why he managed to get away with it all the time. A relative of his who works for the Cowley County Police may have contributed to this, but that's only a guess. That same day, January 6th, a police officer saw Thurber's car, a light blue Cadillac, parked outside his parents' house and decided to talk to him. His father invited the officer into the house. When the police officer asked Justin where he had been yesterday, he said he had driven his car to Winfield, a town about 13 miles outside of Arkansas City, in the morning. There, according to Justin, he met up with his friend and 2 of his friend's buddies, whom he did not personally know very well. Next, the 4 of them began driving around the countryside in a car belonging to one of his friend's buddies until the car got stuck on a dirt road near Cedarvale. Then, as Thurber claimed, he walked toward Arkansas City, which is about 30 miles from Cedarvale. After 6 hours, he got tired of walking and called his father to pick him up. Thurber's father confirmed what he said, saying he picked Justin up wet and dirty, a couple of miles from Cowley State Fishing Lake. Justin also told the police officer that his car, which he left in Winfield, had been returned by friends. The story wasn't very convincing, but there was nothing to charge Thurber with yet, so the officer left. That same evening, officers spoke with Alexis Swartzel, who recently ended a 3-year relationship with Thurber. She told officers Thurber often took her to the Kaw Wildlife Area, southeast of Arkansas City, and she pointed out places she and Thurber would visit. When the police informed Alexis that they were investigating the disappearance of Jody Sanderholm, she was very surprised, and said that Justin had once said that he had begun watching Jody when he was 13 years old. He He would peep at her when she was swimming in the pool in her backyard, and sometimes in the evenings, peek through the window in her room and wait for her to start changing clothes. Police asked Alexis about her reasons for breaking up with Thurber, to which she said she had broken up with him because he was too abusive and had strange tendencies that were becoming more and more frequent. On several occasions, she said, during intimacy, he would choke her unconscious. On top of that, he asked her to fight him because he could not get aroused any other way. It was becoming more and more obvious to the police by the minute that Justin Thurber might be involved in Jody's disappearance. The police had no evidence to link him to the girl's disappearance, but late in the evening of January 6th, Thurber was arrested anyway. Detective Eric Mata arrested Thurber on bail revocation and suspicion of criminal trespass because the investigation into Jody Sanderholm's disappearance revealed that Thurber was on the college campus, where the detective believed Thurber should not be. Thurber told Mata that he wanted to talk to his lawyer. At the same time, police officers arrived at Justin's parents' house with a search warrant. The officers took the shoes Justin had been wearing the day before when his father picked him up. The shoes were wet and were drying on a towel. Thurber's father told police he helped his son clean the mud off the shoes. The clothes Justin was wearing when his father picked him up were also recovered, but by this time he had had time to wash them. The next day, January 7th, searchers trained to identify human activity in rugged terrain set to work in the Kaw Wildlife Area. They found shoe prints that matched Justin Thurber's, as well as several other smaller shoe prints. As darkness fell, they decided to continue the search the next day. On the way home, some searchers drove past Cowley County State Fishing Lake and decided to stop because they heard Thurber was wet when his father picked him up. They discovered a muddy tire track, muddy shoe prints near a public restroom, mail addressed to Jody Sanderholm's parents in a chemical toilet, dance shoes in another toilet, and a flip-flop sandal. Investigators later retrieved cut-off sweatshorts, a wallet containing Jody Sanderholm's driver's license and social security card, her black leotard, a tigerette jacket with Jody Sanderholm's first name on the front, a vehicle floor mat, and a car seat cushion. The sandal matched the impressions found at the Kaw Wildlife Area. Searchers spent the next 2 days around Cowley County State Fishing Lake and the Kaw Wildlife Area. On January 9th, specialists with sonar brought in to survey the bottom of the lake discovered Jody's sunken car. On the same day, the hope of the Sanderholm family also died. Jody's naked body was found under a pile of leaves, logs, and twigs at the Kaw Wildlife Area. Authorities found DNA evidence linking Justin Thurber to both Jody's car and her body. The car had been in the lake for more than 3 days, so police feared that the water that filled the interior had destroyed all evidence. That was partly true. Forensics spent a great many hours before they found a short hair in the interior. Carrie Melton, director of the Forensic DNA Testing Lab, ran mitochondrial DNA tests on the hair found on the driver's seat of Jody Sanderholm's car and concluded that it was almost certainly Justin Thurber's hair. Barbara Leal, an employee of a private DNA testing company, tested samples taken from Jody Sanderholm's right biceps and right side of her chest. She concluded that Thurber could not have been excluded as a participant, although 99% of the population could have been excluded. Cell tower data showed that on the day Jody disappeared, her phone and Justin Thurber's phone were in the same areas at the same time. Lori Leglighter, Jody's best friend, said she saw Thurber in the college parking lot the day she disappeared. When the police looked at the camera footage provided by the college administration, they were convinced that Lori was telling the truth. Thurber was in the college parking lot at the same time rehearsal was going on, and he left that parking lot at the same time as Jody. The tape showed that Thurber followed Jody in his light blue Cadillac. Based on the fact that letters addressed to Jody's parents were found near the lake, investigators speculated that Thurber had followed Jody from the college to her home, and when she got out to retrieve the letters from the mailbox, he attacked her, pushed her into her own car, and drove her away. That theory was confirmed when a shoe print identical to the sole of Justin Thurber's sneakers was found next to the Sanderholm family mailbox. As previously mentioned, footprints of Thurber's shoes and smaller shoe impressions were found at the Kaw Wildlife Area. It was determined that these were the footprints of Jody's shoes found at the fishing lake along with her other belongings. Thurber's footprints and Jody's footprints in the preserve were located side by side, walking along them. At one point, the searchers saw that Jody's footprints were interrupted, and Justin's footprints went deep into the woods. This meant that he was carrying the girl further on his own. His shoe prints were also found where the body had been found. All three of the people Justin said he had been with the day of Jody's disappearance denied what he said. They had not seen Thurber that day, which meant his story about the car being stuck near Cedarvale was a fabrication. The three officers drove Thurber to Cedarvale so he could show them where he said he was. Thurber was unable to determine where he said the car was stuck. Back at the police station, Thurber volunteered to take a polygraph test. He also requested that his relative Chad Monroe, who worked for the Cowley County Sheriff's Office, be present during the questioning. The evidence found was sufficient to indict Justin Thurber. He himself denied guilt, and the judge set his bail at $1 million. Thurber's attorneys tried to convince the court that he was mentally retarded and incompetent, but were unable to do so. Thurber had graduated from high school and even attended college for some time, so the judge found the defense claim of his mental retardation unproven. The medical examiner who conducted the autopsy testified at the trial. He said that the first time he looked at the body, he had no doubt that the last hours of Jody's life were very painful. Her entire body and face were covered with bruises and abrasions. There were clear signs of strangulation on her neck. It was strangulation that was named as the cause of death of Jody Sanderholm. I can't say all the information about what the medical examiner found during the autopsy. Not all horror movie maniacs are as brutal as Thurber was to Jody. Without going into detail, and at the same time to give you some idea of what happened at the Call Wildlife area, I will say the following. The crime was motivated by carnal desire, and Thurber committed the crime with a stick. At trial, in addition to Thurber's ex-girlfriend, 6 other women testified, each claiming that the defendant stalked her. One of them was a coworker of his. In one case, she even had to call the police to have an officer walk her to her car after work. It was already dark, and she was afraid to go to the parking lot because she saw Justin waiting for her. Earlier, he had left a rose and a note under the windshield wiper of her car, saying he liked her and wanted to get to know her better. Several witnesses said they saw Jody Sanderholm's car on January 5, 2007. Carrie Morris, a friend of Jody's, noticed that Jody was sitting in the passenger seat as their cars passed each other in Arkansas City shortly after noon. Morris reported that the man behind the wheel of Jody's car appeared to be a large man. She called Jody's cell phone, but received no answer. 2 other women reported seeing a vehicle that looked like Jody Sanderholm's car while driving on a dirt road south of Arkansas City around 3 p.m. One of them said the driver was Thurber and identified him in court. On February 17, 2009, the jury reached a unanimous verdict, finding Thurber guilty on all accounts and recommending that he be sentenced to death. Realizing what sentence the judge would hand down, Thurber tried to negotiate a plea bargain. His lawyer told the prosecutor that Justin would plead guilty if he were not given the capital punishment. Jody's family opposed such a deal. The presiding judge took the jury's decision into consideration and sentenced Thurber to death by lethal injection in March 2009. In 2008, the state of Kansas signed the Jody Act, which, among other things, expands police authority over stalking suspects and expands the list of actions that can be considered stalking. Since the sentencing, Justin Thurber has not abandoned his attempts to appeal the court's decision. His attorneys are trying to prove that Thurber is mentally retarded. In 2018, the Kansas Supreme Court postponed Thurber's death sentence, citing a Supreme Court of the United States ruling that the execution of defendants, even those with mild developmental disabilities, is unconstitutional. The Sanderholm family said a competency hearing was held during the original trial, and Thurber was found to be fully competent at the time. Jody's mother, Cindy Sanderholm, sat in the courtroom 11 years after her daughter's passing. She said that Thurber had written letters to other girls while in prison, and this should show that he was competent. That's sick. It's just sick, Cindy said. It tells you that he is competent enough to reach out to people and write letters. He knows what he is doing. I'm sure she, Jody, pleaded for her life and he didn't give it to her. She didn't get a second choice. She didn't get a second chance, she added. In August 2021, the Kansas Supreme Court issued an opinion announcing that a state law passed in 2020 allows Thurber, who is appealing a death sentence, to seek appointment by the Cowley County District Court of an attorney to assist in post-conviction DNA testing. Thus, even 16 years after Jody Sanderholm's passing, the final word in this case has yet to be spoken. It should also be noted that no one has been executed since Kansas reinstated the death penalty in 1994. The last time anyone was executed in Kansas was in 1965. Since then, besides Thurber, 9 other people have been sentenced to death, but no sentence has been carried out. We haven't executed anyone in that time frame, and there's no timetable to have any other future executions, said Adam Fanninsteel, the communications spokesperson for Kansas Department of Corrections. I think it's a little shocking that Kansas reinstated the death penalty over 20 years ago, and there's not a plan yet, said Jennifer Aldridge, Jody's older sister. I thought this would have been something that would have been discussed 20 years ago when it was reinstated. Therefore, even if Thurber's death sentence is upheld, there is a good chance that it will never be carried out. 39-year-old Justin Thurber remains at the maximum security El Dorado Correctional Facility in Butler County, Kansas. According to a Kansas Legislative Post Audit Committee report published in 2014, each of the inmates serving time in administrative segregation at El Dorado comes with an annual cost of nearly $49,000. Further, it is not only the cost to house an inmate sentenced to death. Taxpayers also pay nearly 4 times the price to prosecute a case with a death penalty if pursued by the prosecution, $395,000 per case, compared to only $100,000 per case when the death penalty is not sought. For the Sanderholms, taxes are added insult to an unbearable injury and a grueling wait for justice in the case of their daughter, Jody. It hurts me so bad every week when I see my paycheck and I know I'm paying tax money to feed him, said Brian Sanderholm. Death is what he deserves, and that's what the law stated, said Cindy Sanderholm. So we need to get the law fixed so we can use it. If it was your daughter, your son, it was our daughter, what would you want to have happen? Asked Brian Sanderholm. Most regrettably, Cynthia and Sanderholm, Jody's mother, passed away on December 2nd, 2022 at the age of 63. The case of Kelsey Smith went shopping for a gift and vanished without a trace. How often do laws enacted at the state level, or the rules and policies of individual companies designed to protect people and make their lives more comfortable and safe end up causing harm rather than good? In today's story, a mobile phone operator refused to provide the location of a missing girl, citing privacy laws. In reality, however, the company was obstructing the investigation, delaying the process. Although tragically it was too late to assist the girl, in other cases, timely access to such data could save someone's life. The case of young Kelsey Smith, who was tragically killed just a month after celebrating her 18th birthday, not only shook the United States, but also captured the attention of the world, as it was widely reported in international media. The girl was abducted in broad daylight from a crowded location, and her body, bearing signs of violence, was later discovered outside the city. The search for Kelsey took almost a week due to the inability to track her movements through her cell phone signal. This circumstance led to much debate and set a precedent that resulted in a series of amendments and the passage of a law named after the victim. But let's look at Kelsey Smith's story from the beginning and try to understand how she was abducted right outside a shopping center, under the watch of dozens of surveillance cameras, and whether this tragedy could have been avoided. We will also explore the personality of the abductor and criminal, who was considered by all to be a loving husband and caring father. Who is Edwin Hall? We will begin our examination of this difficult case by getting to know the man who caused the terrible tragedy. Edwin Roy Hall, friends knew him as Jack Hall, was born in 1981, April 17th, in the small town of Lee's Summit, located almost on the border of the states of Missouri and Kansas. He was the second child in the low-income and extremely disadvantaged family. Edwin's childhood was hard, if not to say harsh. Parents of the boy used in large quantities of hot drinks and illegal substances, not engaged in the upbringing of children, and mistreated them. Later, Hall will tell about the fact that at the age of 5, he was intimately abused by his uncle, his father's brother, but unequivocally confirm or deny this statement is simply not possible. Many thought that this detail was invented by the perpetrator's lawyer in order to make his client look like a victim of circumstances at the trial and try to mitigate his punishment. But be that as it may, and at the age of 6, Edwin found himself in an orphanage after his father was behind bars and his mother was deprived of parental rights. In the following years, the boy changed several foster families, but each time he was abandoned after a while and returned back to the orphanage. This was due to the uncontrolled aggression of the child, as well as his cruelty. From an early age, Hall showed sadistic tendencies towards animals. He liked to torture them and watch the suffering. The boy did not recognize anyone's authority, disobeyed his foster parents, stole and ran away from home. His last foster family returned Edwin to state custody at the age of 15. This was after the teenager attacked his stepsister with a knife. Then the tragedy was avoided and the boy was pitted and not prosecuted. However, a year later, he again came to the attention of the police when he deliberately hit another orphanage pupil, who was much younger than him, on the head with a baseball bat. As an adult, Hall had no record with the police, and he seemed to have matured, taken charge, and finally reformed. At the age of 20, he married a girl named Alida, who bore him a son a year and a half later. Edwin got an old Chevrolet truck from the 70s, on which he worked, transporting various goods. His neighbors knew him as a quiet, humble, and friendly guy, as well as a good family man. However, he also had another secret life, which became known only when Hall found himself in the dock for committing serious crimes. Who was the victim? Kelsey Smith. Kelsey Ann Smith was born in 1989, on May 3rd, in a place called Overland Park, which ranks as the second most populous city in the state of Kansas. She was the third of 5 children in the large and very close-knit family of Gregory and Missy Smith. Growing up alongside her older brothers Steve and sister Lindsay, as well as her younger siblings Caddy and Zach, she was very close to all of them. The family patriarch, Gregory Gregg Smith, was a former military man and a veteran of the United States Navy. He had also served in the police force for over 2 decades and was now enjoying his well-deserved retirement. Meanwhile, the mother, Missy Smith, had dedicated her life to healthcare, having worked for many years at one of the local hospitals. Despite her professional commitments, she brilliantly managed to balance work with raising her numerous offspring and creating a cozy home environment. From a young age, Kelsey was an extremely active, sociable, and theatrical child. She loved to sing and dance, attended a music school where she learned to play several musical instruments, and eagerly participated in school theater productions and choir performances. In addition to this, she thoroughly enjoyed gymnastics and loved soccer, often attending various sporting events with her father and brothers, and she was a fan of the local team. Young Smith had many friends, possessed a great sense of humor, was talented in numerous areas, and knew how to make a good impression on those around her. She also had a profound love for animals from childhood, and dreamed of going to college after high school to pursue a career as a veterinarian. In her senior years of high school, Kelsey took a job in the local orchestra, where she played the clarinet, performing at various city events. This job allowed her to save enough money in just 6 months to buy her first personal car, a 1987 Buick Regal. Her parents weren't too fond of the fact that her car was older than she was, and offered to add some money from the family budget to buy something more recent. However, it was crucial for her to purchase her first vehicle independently, with her own money, so she declined their offer. Kelsey's personal life, it's noteworthy that the Smiths went to great lengths to provide their children with the very best, caring deeply for their education and holistic development. However, they also raised their offspring with a strong sense of discipline. There were clear rules in their home that everyone abided by without exception. For instance, all family members were expected to share their plans and always inform each other if they were going to be out late. Kelsey herself was always punctual, never late, and would always tell her parents where she was going and who she was spending time with. During her senior year, Kelsey entered into a romantic relationship with a young man named John Beersmith. According to Kelsey, it was a deep and mutual love at first sight, the kind you read about in books or see in movies. The couple rang in the new year of 2007 together, and from then on were practically inseparable. Smith's partner, a year her senior, appeared to be a serious young man who treated his beloved with the utmost care and respect. Both sets of parents approved of their children's choice and did not stand in the way of their relationship. In May 2007, Kelsey celebrated her 18th birthday. That same month, she graduated from high school and was thrilled to learn that she had been accepted into a prestigious college in Kansas, where she intended to study veterinary medicine. The following days were, without exaggeration, some of the happiest in the young woman's life. Unfortunately, they turned out to be her last. Smith, along with her classmates, attended parties celebrating the end of high school. She had a great time, fully enjoying the festive atmosphere as well as romantic dates with her beloved. At this point, she'd achieved everything she had wished for: admission into her dream college, a relationship with a worthy young man who was about to propose, and it seemed a long, happy life lay ahead of her. The disappearance from the mall parking lot. On June 2nd, 2007, Kelsey and John were preparing to celebrate a significant milestone in their relationship, the 6-month anniversary of when they first started dating. John planned to make the day even more memorable by proposing to Kelsey. He had a beautiful engagement ring custom-made for the occasion, reserved a table for two at a restaurant, and the evening was set to be one of the happiest in their lives together. Kelsey was unaware of the upcoming proposal, which was meant to be a surprise. She, too, was looking for a gift to surprise and delight John. That Saturday, she styled her hair, did her makeup, dressed up, and drove her car to a Target Corporation store located just 10 minutes from her home. There was no indication of the tragedy that was about to unfold. Around 7 in the evening, she called her mother to say she had found a gift for John, but needed to find the perfect gift bag for it, preferably something with a romantic touch. Missy suggested checking a shopping mall across the street from Target, confident that it would have what Kelsey was looking for. Kelsey thanked her mother for the advice and said she would be home soon, where John was supposed to pick her up at 8 o'clock. That was the last time Missy heard her daughter's voice. Kelsey never made it back home. When John arrived at 8 with a large bouquet of flowers, he was shocked and frightened to find that Kelsey was not there. Her parents were equally terrified, as it was completely out of character for her not to answer phone calls or texts. She vanished in broad daylight, in a busy area, and no one noticed her disappearance. Search and investigation. The family patriarch, along with his 2 eldest children, set out to search for their daughter. Upon finding her car parked at the Oak Park Mall, a sliver of hope emerged that Kelsey might still be inside the mall for some unknown reason. However, after searching through all the floors and stores and inquiring with the salespeople and security guards if anyone had seen the girl, they were convinced she was not there. Returning to the car, which appeared undisturbed without any signs of struggle or violence, the father, leveraging his experience as a former police officer, decided not to touch anything. It was possible the car was part of a crime scene, and it was crucial not to tamper with or destroy any evidence. The girl's parents reported her missing to the police that same day, but were initially met with resistance to start an immediate search. The explanation was that since Kelsey was 18, she wouldn't legally be considered missing until 24 hours had passed since her disappearance. However, Kelsey's father, not one to back down in using his old connections, insisted on an immediate search for his daughter. Moreover, he made inquiries to see if any hospitals in the city had admitted women matching their daughter's description. Kelsey's family and fiancé were interviewed that same evening to establish their alibis and rule them out as suspects, a standard procedure. Surveillance footage from the Target store was also reviewed. The video showed Kelsey entering the store, browsing the selection, making a purchase, and then, while talking on the phone, leaving the building to head back to her car. At that moment, she was speaking with her mother, asking where to find a gift bag, and then headed to the mall across the street, following her mother's advice. Essentially, Kelsey simply drove out, turned around, and parked at the Oak Park Mall, leaving her car near the side entrance almost against the wall. Her car was thoroughly inspected by experts. It seemed untouched from the outside. The gift she bought for John was on the passenger seat, and her backpack with personal items, a tablet, and a wallet containing about $300 in cash was in the back. Therefore, a robbery was quickly ruled out. It appeared that the car's owner had left only with her credit card and phone in her pocket, as everything else remained inside the car. No signs of a struggle, blood, or damage were found. There were no foreign fingerprints except for one found on the driver's seatbelt. This fingerprint belonged to neither Kelsey, her relatives, nor her boyfriend. Issues with the cellular company tracking the young woman's location could have been possible through the signal of her mobile phone. By that time, the device itself had become inaccessible, presumably turned off or damaged, but it was still feasible to determine the last known location where the mobile phone was active in order to narrow down the search area. However, Verizon Communications, the wireless carrier, did not provide the necessary data for the investigation for several days. Interestingly, the company did not outright refuse to cooperate, but kept promising to look into the matter, effectively dragging out the process. Back in 2007, telecommunications companies were allowed to withhold subscriber data from law enforcement agencies, including the police or FBI, without a specific court order. They cited information privacy laws, and even situations where an individual's safety or life might be at risk were not considered exceptions to this rule. The disturbing stranger, upon closer examination of the surveillance footage, a chilling detail was uncovered: a mysterious stranger following the young woman like a shadow. He didn't stand out at first because he always kept his distance and didn't attempt to interact with Kelsey directly. The individual in question was a Caucasian male with a pleasant appearance, estimated to be in his early to mid-20s, sporting dark, short hair and a light beard. He was dressed casually in a plain white t-shirt and black shorts. He entered the Target store roughly half a minute after the girl, and followed her through all the sections she visited, maintaining a few meters distance. This mysterious man was captured by all the surveillance cameras that Kelsey was, and later during the trial, the prosecution would describe his behavior as akin to a predator stalking its prey. He exited the store after her, and making sure she was alone, followed her to the Oak Park parking lot in his Chevrolet truck. It's likely that he overheard her conversation with her mother, as he was practically behind Kelsey while she was on the phone. Consequently, he could have learned about her plans to visit the neighboring shopping center. Unfortunately, Smith parked her car in a poorly chosen spot next to a side door near a storage area where shadows fell on her vehicle, making it nearly impossible to discern the events on the camera footage. While Kelsey was still seated in her car, the truck parked beside her, and a figure in a white t-shirt and black shorts emerged. The stranger approached her from the driver's side door, and then she, presumably under the threat of harm, got behind the wheel of his Chevrolet, and the truck drove off in an unknown direction. Media attention and alert viewers from the outset, largely thanks to the connections and experience of Gregory Smith, the media were enlisted to cover the investigation. Smith knew that the louder the outcry, the broader the coverage in the press, and the more attention it garnered, the higher the chances of finding their daughter and bringing the responsible party to justice. The story was covered not only in national, but also in international media, including on the popular show America's Most Wanted. When surveillance footage revealed the mysterious stranger following Kelsey, the frames showing his face most clearly were broadcasted in the news, urging people to come forward if they recognized the man. That same evening, the police began receiving calls from individuals claiming to have seen the man in various cities and even states. Although most of these reports were mistaken, each one was investigated. On June 6th, a Mrs. Miguez called in, stating she recognized her neighbor Edwin Hall in the footage, but had hesitated to report it initially due to doubt. However, seeing the information about the truck removed her last doubts, as Hall also drove an old 1970s Chevrolet. Horrific discovery at Longview Lake and suspect's arrest. On June 6, 2007, several pivotal events unfolded in the investigation. First, crucial data regarding the last known location of Kelsey's phone signal was finally obtained from Verizon Communications. A specific cell tower was pinpointed, establishing a search radius of 1.1 miles to the north of it. Within 45 minutes of initiating the search operation, the lifeless body of the young woman was found in the brush near Longview Lake, Missouri, approximately 30 miles from where she was abducted. The medical examiners determined that Kelsey had been brutally assaulted and then strangled with her own belt. Her body was discovered without clothing, except for the belt used to strangle her around her neck. After the assault, her body was callously discarded in the bushes, covered only slightly with dry branches. Over the 4 days it lay exposed under the June sun, her remains were severely disfigured by insects and other wildlife, making them almost unrecognizable. Nonetheless, the examination confirmed that it was indeed the missing young Smith. The second significant event on June 6th was the arrest of the main suspect. When the police arrived at the man's residence, he was completely calm, acknowledged that his friends called him Jack, and agreed to provide a statement at the station. During the interrogation, he identified himself as Edwin Hall. Presented with a photograph of Kelsey, he claimed never to have seen her before. Even when shown surveillance footage from the store showing him following her closely, he insisted he had merely visited Target for personal reasons and hadn't noticed her, suggesting their appearance together in the footage was merely a bizarre coincidence. Irrefutable evidence. Edwin was evidently confident that he had left no trace behind and could not be held accountable. His van was clean. He had assaulted the victim using contraception, leaving no DNA evidence. Therefore, Hall agreed to cooperate with the investigation and even volunteered to provide his DNA sample and fingerprints. Crucially, his thumbprint matched the one found on the victim's car's seatbelt buckle, becoming a pivotal piece of evidence. Furthermore, during a thorough search of the suspect's home, a hidden air pistol was found with Kelsey's DNA traces on the barrel. Hall was then officially charged with the abduction, assault, and termination of the young woman's life. Since Smith was abducted in Kansas, but her lifeless body was discovered in Missouri, there arose a question regarding the jurisdiction of the trial. This detail was significantly important as it affected the potential sentence. In Missouri, the perpetrator faced the possibility of capital punishment. Trial and Sentence Hall, realizing the gravity of his situation, and after consulting with his attorney, decided to fully admit his guilt and disclose the details and circumstances of the crime in hopes of receiving a lesser sentence. He recounted how he noticed Kelsey as she entered the store and followed her. Indeed, he was close enough to overhear her phone conversation, learning she planned to visit the shopping center across the street. Edwin made sure Smith was alone, followed her to the adjacent parking lot, and was pleased when she parked in a secluded spot near the side entrance. He then emerged from his vehicle, armed with a pistol, waited for the victim to return to her car, and prevented her from closing the door as she was getting into the driver's seat. Apparently, she had already pulled out the seatbelt, but he didn't allow her to buckle up, leaving his print on it in the process. Next, he placed the pistol barrel in the unfortunate girl's mouth, coercing her to move to his vehicle's driver's seat under threat. Smith drove Hall's truck while he aimed the weapon at her and instructed where to go. Upon reaching a remote area at the state border, he ordered her out of the truck and led her into the bushes. There, he assaulted her, strangled her with the belt, and covered her body with branches. He meticulously cleaned his truck's cabin to remove any fingerprints, DNA, or other traces of the victim's presence, and hid the pistol with Kelsey's saliva at his home, confident it would never be found. When asked about his motive, he couldn't provide a clear explanation, but indifferently commented on her fantastic legs. Additionally, during the investigation, several other women and girls victimized by Hall's actions came forward. As a result, charges of corruption of a minor, harassment, and theft were added to the existing accusations. Hall's lawyer attempted to appeal to the court's sympathy, highlighting his client's troubled childhood, past victimhood, lack of parental care, and upbringing in foster homes. The defense's efforts were in vain, but the lawyer was the only person to speak on the defendant's behalf and support him. Hall's wife was present at all court hearings, but sat quietly in a corner, refusing to defend her husband. On September 16, 2008, Johnson County's judge sentenced Edwin Roy Hall to 27 life sentences without the possibility of parole. After hearing the verdict, the defendant apologized to the Smith family for his actions, and then broke down in tears. He is currently serving his sentence at the Hutchinson Correctional Facility in Kansas. The Kelsey Smith Act. The role of Verizon Communications in this case, which hesitated for 4 days to provide data regarding the last known location of the missing girl's phone signal, drew significant attention. The company's leadership cited privacy laws and the absence of a court order, the issuance of which would take time. Although it was later determined that this information wouldn't have saved young Smith, in other situations, it could help preserve the lives and health of individuals in danger. This led to the enactment of the Kelsey Smith Act by Kansas in 2009, mandating telecommunications companies to provide subscriber location information when there is a risk of death or serious physical harm to the individual. An additional 29 states, including Missouri by 2012, adopted similar legislation. In 2021, Oklahoma, Montana, and Illinois also passed the Kelsey Smith Act. Since its enactment, this law has helped save many lives. For instance, in 2015, in Lenexa, Kansas, when a perpetrator stole a car with a child in a car seat, the police were able to locate him within half an hour by tracking the signal from the mobile phone left on the back seat by the child's mother. In 2021, in Illinois, a similar method was used to find a young woman who attempted to end her life by jumping off a cliff. She survived, albeit with significant injuries, but the prompt tracking of her phone's signal led to her rescue. Interestingly, the Smith family never requested the law to be named after their deceased daughter. The idea came from Kansas Senator Rob Olson. Following their tragedy, the girl's family established a foundation to assist crime victims and continues to raise awareness among young people about safety issues. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. In our story today, we'll talk about a rare snake that suddenly attacked its owner, ending his life. Ben Renk was just 29 years old when he was found deceased in his renowned snake breeding facility. Benjamin Blue Birch Renk was born in August 1987 in Missouri. He grew up in the countryside alongside his family. Ben had an older brother, Sam, with whom he shared a very close bond. In 1989, the Renk family moved to a picturesque farmhouse. The boys spent a lot of their time outdoors, and it was then that Ben began to take an interest in snakes. A tragic incident in September 1992 triggered a series of unfortunate events. The family was away when a gas leak occurred, leading to an explosion in their beautiful home. The Ranks were forced to move into a trailer. After some time, Ben's mother Kim was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. Despite these hardships, the family overcame them. They were very close-knit and always supported each other in any situation. Recovering from previous tragedies, in 2002, they moved to a new home where a special room was designed for Ben to keep his snakes. In 2009, after a long battle with cancer, Kim passed away. Before her death, she made her sons promise to look after the farm and pass it on to their children. As time went by, Ben's love for snakes knew no bounds, and the young man founded Rank Reptiles, which soon gained recognition. This allowed him to sell snakes worldwide, from the United Kingdom to Japan. Breeding snakes became the meaning of his life. He was described as a great breeder who was devoted to his work, caring more about the snakes than the money. The reptile farm bred a multitude of reptilian subspecies, growing and reproducing both the most common species and some of the rarest subspecies on Earth. Ben's reptiles were of immense value. Just a portion of his python collection was valued at over $1 million. Ben was a solitary man who had long aspired to start a. In 2010, at a party, he met a woman named Lindley. Their relationship moved forward quickly. Within weeks, Ben introduced his girlfriend to his brother Sam and Sam's fiancé, Eli. Eli and Lindley had sons from previous relationships, so they found common ground quickly and became friends. Lindley soon became part of the Rank family. The couple began living together. Lindley helped Ben at the snake breeding farm. They were in love and lived as a full family. In March 2012, Lindley gave birth to their daughter Amelia. Ben was thrilled to become a father. However, the happy family life faced challenges again. Frank Rank, Ben's father, encountered significant business troubles. Previously, he had engaged in fraudulent stock transactions to cover medical bills and Kim's treatment expenses. Just a day before the FBI planned to visit the farm, Frank took his own life. Frank's passing halted the investigation. The sons were deeply affected by another parental loss, but managed to pull through by supporting each other. Ben inherited the house and farm, while Sam received an amount of money far exceeding the house's value. Each brother had their own family and children, but this didn't stop them from living as one big family in their parents' home. They lived together harmoniously, with Sam spending his inheritance on repairing the farm without hesitation. Initially, things were fine, but soon financial disputes caused friction between the brothers after their father's death. Ben focused on his business and family, and decided to formalize his relationship with Lindley on April 14, 2014. They married officially, adding Lindley as a full-fledged member of the Rank household. Ben and Lindley also opened a second business, a spa named Essentia Spa Incorporated, but it faced financial difficulties under Lindley's management. Financial issues often led to arguments between them, despite Lindley's hard work being insufficient to cover all salon expenses consistently. At the same time, Sam and his wife faced significant financial challenges. Ben allowed them to sell some of the furniture of the house. Lindley disapproved, leading to a rift between the families. The relationship was irreparably damaged. Ben decided to improve the family's financial situation by arranging to sell some rare reptiles for a significant sum. However, the deal fell through due to a tragedy that occurred on the farm. On June 8, 2017, Lindley walked into one of the farm's barns. There, on the floor in a pool of blood, lay Ben. Lindley called her brother Sam for help and dialed the emergency number. She reported that she had found her husband unconscious on the ground. During the conversation, Lindley dropped the phone and ran outside. Sam continued the conversation and confirmed that his brother was dead. Sam suggested that a snake might be to blame for what had happened. Montgomery County Sheriff's deputies were called to the snake breeding facility for the first time in a long while. Law enforcement officers were afraid to enter the farm, facing over 3,000 snakes, and having to conduct an examination of a man lying in blood, wary of a possible attack from a deadly viper believed to be the assailant. However, when Coroner Dave Colbert arrived and took a closer look, he discovered shell casings on a shelf at eye level. This was something far more sinister than a venomous snake bite. Shell casings were found near the body, but no weapon was discovered. The assailant had shot Ben multiple times in the back and head. None of the relatives heard shots or saw the attacker. Sam and Lindley were taken to the sheriff's office for questioning. Lindley suggested that Sam might be involved in her husband's death, even citing a motive. Apparently Ben wanted to sell the house, but Sam was opposed. Sam was asked to undergo a lie detector test, which he passed. The police had no reason to detain Lindley and Sam, so they were released. The investigation into who might have wanted Ben Renk dead began with various theories proposed, the first being robbery. But it remained unconfirmed as none of the rare snakes were missing and all valuable items remained untouched. Just days after Ben's demise, police interrogated Lindley again and tested her hands and clothing for gunpowder residue. However, results came back negative. Following her husband's funeral, Lindley ceased communication with Sam and Eli altogether. She sold her husband's business, inherited the house, and sought to claim a life insurance payout for Ben worth $1 million. After receiving the insurance money, Lindley planned to sell the Rennick family home for $740,000. Sam's family was notified about the eviction. Discovering the rapid insurance claim and business sale following her husband's passing, Sam Rennick suspected his brother's wife in the event. Sharing his suspicions with investigators, Lindley was called in for another interrogation. There, she admitted to having complex relations with Ben and occasionally meeting with a man named Arik. Arik had an alibi, so he was excluded from the list of suspects. Lindley's admissions were startling. It turned out about 3 years after their marriage was officially registered, she was unfaithful to Ben with at least 2 different men. Messages between the couple showed that Ben suspected his wife of infidelity, which had indeed strained their relationship lately. On October 5, 2017, the Missouri State Highway Patrol conducted a polygraph test on Lindley and informed her that she had failed it. However, without solid evidence linking her to the crime, she was released. Nevertheless, the investigation into Ben Rennick's case slowed, but did not cease. Later investigators learned that a month before Ben Rennick's passing, Lindley had made her first attempt on his life. She concocted a story of Ben being a cruel tyrant who oppressed her daily and even physically assaulted her. She shared this story with a spa salon coworker to garner support and assistance. They plotted to end Ben's life by giving him a poisonous protein shake laced with 15 Percocet pills. Unaware, Ben drank it. He fell severely ill during that period but survived, oblivious to having been poisoned. Lindley Rennick was interrogated by investigators 6 times in total, and further assistance in the investigation came unexpectedly. On January 14, 2020, information from a state prison emerged. A witness claimed to know about Ben Rennick's death. The witness was Brandon Blackwell. He told Missouri State Highway Patrol investigators that Lindley had shot Ben and conspired with her ex-boyfriend. Brandon mentioned that he had dated Lindley while she was married to Ben. 1.5 years after Ben's death, they had a child together, but by 2019 they had separated. Brandon claimed that Lindley confessed to the act and conspired with her spa salon coworker Ashley Shaw and another ex-boyfriend, Michael Humphrey. Years after Ben's demise, Lindley Rennick and her former boyfriend Michael Humphrey were arrested for his death. However, following their arrest, Lindley and Humphrey pointed fingers at each other. So who really pulled the trigger? According to Michael's testimony on the day of the event, he went to the farm with Lindley, who asked him to pose as a buyer. He put on gloves and was supposed to shoot Ben but couldn't do it. Eventually, Lindley took the gun and shot her husband herself. The investigation into Ben Rennick's death continued for 3 long years. On January 16, 2020, arrest warrants were issued for Lindley Rennick, Michael Humphrey, and Ashley Shaw. Ashley was offered immunity in exchange for her cooperation and testified against her boss. The former spa salon employee shared that Lindley had complained about her husband and convinced her to assist in a plan. She claimed that Ben was constantly belittling, demeaning, and even physically harming her. Fearing divorce would lead to Ben gaining custody of her children, Lindley decided to eliminate him. Planning together to poison him with a lethal cocktail during questioning, Lindley and Michael accused each other of Ben's demise. In October 2021, Michael Humphrey faced trial in County. His lawyers hoped that revealing the murder weapon would lead to a second-degree murder charge. Despite possessing the gun, no conclusive DNA evidence was found on it. To lessen his sentence, Michael Humphrey made a deal with the prosecution by disclosing the location of the murder weapon. His cooperation led to a life sentence on a less severe charge of second-degree murder without defense at the trial. On January 3, 2021, Michael Humphrey was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole. The against Lindley Rennick began on December 6, 2021. She was charged with the shooting and demise of Ben Rennick on June 8, 2017, at his snake breeding facility in New Florence. Court documents stated that the plot to end Ben Rennick's life originated in Lindley's spa salon. The probable cause statement mentioned that Ben was aware of Lindley's financial troubles and that Lindley feared Ben could take her children away. This led her to fabricate a story of domestic abuse. The first attempt to end Ben Rennick involved a protein shake laced with narcotics. Search warrants for Ben and Lindley Rennick's Facebook accounts confirmed the protein shake story and Ben's awareness of Lindley's financial issues. The court hearing detailed the events of the day when Ben Rennick was killed, fully reconstructing the sequence of events through cross-examination. On the day of the incident, Michael Humphrey picked up Lindley from the spa salon while Shaw sent text messages from Lindley's phone inside the spa to conceal their true location and mislead the investigation. According to court documents, Humphrey intended to end Ben's life, but asked Lindley to do it. After firing shots, Humphrey collected most of the casings but missed some in his haste. He also disposed of Lindley's clothing after returning to the spa, where Lindley took a shower, which helped avoid detection of gunpowder residue on her hands and clothes. Defense attorney Catherine Burrug asked Lindley Rennick to share her personal and family history, education, relationship with ex-boyfriend Michael Humphrey, work history, and the lead-up to her marriage with Ben Rennick. This was aimed at portraying her as a victim of domestic violence. However, no evidence of such violence was found, undermining this defense narrative. Michael Humphrey was part of a group that allegedly planned to end Ben Rennick's life. Lindley Rennick described her relationship with Humphrey as codependent, involving his drug dealing and her addiction. She ended her relationship with Humphrey at the end of 2010, according to previous witness statements, but reconnected with him about a month before Ben Rennick's death. Lindley Rennick firmly denied the prosecution's allegations regarding the alleged plans to end Ben Rennick's life. This included the supposed failed attempt to poison Ben with a protein shake containing narcotics. The couple faced financial and marital difficulties. The spa center wasn't doing well, and contractual deals for selling snakes had yet to provide financial benefits. In court, Lindley admitted to having extramarital relationships with several men, expressing deep regret for her actions. By the time she considered discussing divorce, she was unsure who to turn to, given her father's history with divorce and his strong views on both divorce and affairs. Seeking someone to support her in her conversation with Ben, she reached out to past boyfriends and reconnected with Michael Humphrey. During cross-examination by the prosecution, Lindley confessed to willingly participating in her husband's death and intentionally concealing Michael Humphrey's involvement. She cited marital difficulties, including disputes, alleged physical and sexual abuse by Ben, and the stress associated with his snake breeding business. Lindley feared Ben and worried about his reaction whenever she brought up the topic of divorce. On June 8, 2017, she brought Michael Humphrey to the farm that day. She claimed her presence at the farm was not meant to end her husband's life, but rather to discuss a divorce. Lindley mentioned taking out some trash from Ben before entering the nursery, where she saw Humphrey and Ben washing their hands. Lindley described being unable to hear their conversation, as she was preoccupied with how she would tell Ben she wanted a divorce. Her voice trembled while recounting seeing Humphrey draw a pistol and shoot her husband. Hence she heard more shots. Reality hit hard when Lindley returned to the snake breeding facility and found Ben's body. She called Ben's brother Sam, who arrived soon after. They checked for a pulse and whether Ben was breathing, hoping he might still be alive. Lindley expressed regret for not immediately informing police that she had been at the breeding facility earlier with Michael Humphrey. The life insurance policy that Ben had taken out years earlier could have resulted in a payout of $1 million. However, Lindley waived her rights to this money. During the court hearing, Lindley expressed regrets about her ongoing deceit. "I was just trying to escape from the truth of what happened," she stated, clarifying that she never wished for her husband's death. Following the final verdict, Lindley Rennick's defense team chose not to petition for a new trial and no appeals were filed against her conviction. Lindley Rennick filed a defamation lawsuit against Blackwell, asserting that his statements about her involvement in her husband's death were false. However, prosecutor Kevin Zellner questioned Lindley's testimony during cross-examination. He queried why she didn't check on her husband after hearing gunshots, and why she didn't call 911. Furthermore, he asked why she sent friendly messages to him and Humphrey after the shooting, and continued to lie even when emergency responders got involved. During sentencing for second-degree murder and armed criminal action, Lindley Rank broke down but did not admit guilt. On December 9, 2021, she was found guilty of second-degree murder. The 33-year-old was sentenced to 13 years for murder and an additional 3 years for armed criminal action in January by Judge Kevin Crane, a total sentence of 16 years. Sam Rennick's final words conveyed deep disappointment. He was astonished that an individual's life in Missouri could be valued at just 13 years. Ben Rennick, a young man brimming with hope and a promising future, found himself in a dire situation due to the actions of one woman. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Mary Goff. Mary Goff was from County Meath and was described as happy and jolly, but also very quiet and laid back. She was the youngest of 5 children, and her Mary was described as the glue of the family, a common tribute when a family member has been lost. Mary could hold her own thanks to having 4 older brothers, but her mother described her as a best friend and confidant, the kind of relationship any mother would want with their daughter. Mary was straightforward. If she was happy, she made it known, and if she was upset, she expressed it. In 1993, at the age of 19, Mary was working at the Huntsman pub in Gormanstown. There, she met a man named Colin Whalen, who was 22 years old. He wasn't her usual type, a bit formal and serious, but he seemed to have his life together as he worked in the IT field. In 1995, Mary and Colin hit a rough patch and broke up. Mary didn't know what she had done, and she was distraught. Her mother reached out to Colin for an explanation, but he responded that it was not his concern how Mary was dealing with the breakup, and that it was not his fault. This gave Mary's mother her first insight into how heartless Colin could be. Eventually, Mary dusted herself off and focused on her future. She got a great job as a secretary in the production house that created the film Rob Roy. After her contract was up, she was offered a job in Scotland by the same production company, but she turned it down, speculated to be because she still held a torch for Colin and was hoping to get back with him. After 6 months apart, Mary's wish came true, and she and Colin got back together. This time, the relationship seemed more serious. In 1997, Colin bought a house in Balbriggan on the outskirts of Dublin, and not long after, Mary and Colin moved in together and seemed very happy. In 1998, Mary and her partner got engaged while on holiday. Mary was overjoyed and ready to get married straight away, but the wedding did not take place for another 2 years. On September 9, 2000, the big day finally arrived. However, Mary did not appear to be the radiant bride one would expect. At one point, she was standing outside the church with her new husband and burst into tears, running back into the church. Her family and friends followed her, concerned, but her husband Colin did not. They thought Mary was sad because her father, who had passed away in 1989, was not there. Mary later told a friend that she felt overwhelmed by all the attention and being the center of attention. But there was something else going on behind the scenes. In January 2001, a new year and new beginnings, Mary decided to get herself in order and get organized. She went to a doctor and was eager to undergo the detoxification program she had booked, but Mary would never get to do it. On March 1, 2001, shortly after midnight, a 999 call was made by Colin Whalen. The operator guided him through performing CPR, and the ambulance soon arrived, finding Mary wrapped in a duvet with a towel under her head. The ambulance crew noted that Mary was cold to the touch, which was unusual for someone who had just fallen down the stairs. It only took 15 minutes for the responders to arrive, so she should not have been cold. They also observed that there was blood coming from Mary's nose, but there were no signs of blood on Colin, who was supposed to have performed CPR on her. The position of Mary's body was strange. She was laid out straight, and her head was at an awkward angle, with no apparent broken bones. Already, evidence was mounting that all was not as it should have been. Mary was declared dead at Beaumont Hospital in Dublin, and her family were notified and arrived at the hospital. Shortly afterwards, when Mary's mother approached Colin, he had his head in his hands, and she asked how Mary was. Without looking up, he announced that she was dead. Mary's mother was absolutely devastated upon hearing the news that her only daughter had died, and she couldn't believe that Colin had told her in such a cold, emotionless, matter-of-fact way. Mary's sudden death was flagged, and an autopsy was performed by the state pathologist, Dr. Mary Cassidy. Mary had a swollen tongue, hemorrhaging in the eyes, and a mark on her neck, along with carpet burns consistent with being dragged down the stairs, but with no head injuries or broken bones. This led the pathologist to conclude that Mary was strangled to death, but the only confusing thing was there's no ligature bruising going the whole way around the neck, just bruising on the left side, which is inconsistent with strangulation. The case was now a murder inquiry, and it landed on the desk of Pat Murray. He brought Colin in for questioning at Balbergen Garden Station the next morning, and he was definitely not acting like the grieving widower. Detective Pat Murray gave no hint to Colin that it was now a murder investigation, and to make him feel at ease, he told him the interview was just a formality to find out what exactly happened. Colin stuck to his story, and admitted he was the only person in the house with Mary when she died. He told the detective that he and Mary were watching TV, and she decided to go upstairs for a shower, and moments later, at around midnight, he heard a thump-thump. He ran to see what was going on, and Mary was at the bottom of the stairs. He went upstairs to grab a towel, as there was so much blood, and wrapped her in a duvet to keep her warm. Investigators informed the Goff family that Mary's death was now being investigated as a murder, but asked them not to disclose this to the family. The forensic team visited the house and found blood on the walls of the bedroom and on the upstairs landing. The phone in the hallway showed no signs of transfer blood or mucus. The team also checked the alarm to determine when it was last activated, and found that no windows or doors had been opened after 9:05 p.m. when the couple had arrived home that evening. There were no signs of a break-in, and it was clear that no third party was involved. In their search, they would also uncover a life insurance policy that Colin had taken out on both of them in June 2000, 3 months before they got married, and shortly after it was approved, he upped the policy to 400,000 Irish pounds. If Colin died, she would receive that amount, and the same if Mary died, Colin would receive it. What was strange about the policy, besides the amount for a couple so young to have such a large policy, it was only valid for 10 years. After that, it would be worthless. A week after the murder, Mary's funeral was held in the same church where he had gotten married 6 months earlier. Of course, Colin pretended to be deeply grieved, which was embarrassing for everyone. The Goff family discreetly overlooked Colin's outbursts, so as not to jeopardize the case. The detective soon moved on to Colin's work computer in the bank, and completely wiped its history. Fortunately, the bank had backed up all the computers in the office on a secret server, and what the detective found was a mountain of evidence. Searches had been made on strangulation, asphyxiation, and the effects of lack of oxygen. Colin had made no less than 22 searches on how to kill Mary, weeks before their wedding. They also discovered that Colin was very active on chat sites, using the name Celtic Tackler, and describing himself as a widower, a true red-blooded Irish male. One particular contact was with a divorced woman in Wales, to whom he had claimed that his wife had died in a car accident. They were supposed to meet in March 2001, and he had told her he was coming into a large sum of money. This poor woman had fallen hard for Colin, and when the detective interviewed her and told her the real story, she would be left devastated. Also, they discovered on Colin's computer research into American killers, and one in particular, Henry Wallace, who was active in the 1990s. Wallace's method to kill his victims was to use a towel to wrap around a cord to strangle them, as it left no ligature marks. He also kept his victims warm, so forensics couldn't determine time of death. This was a huge piece of evidence. The detective combed through Colin's house once again, looking for something that he may have used as a ligature. They tested numerous pieces in the home, but when it came to Colin's dressing gown, they noticed it was overstretched, and tests came back positive for Mary's blood in the fibers of the cord. Imagine Colin wearing the murder weapon around his waist as paramedics worked to save his wife. Meanwhile, the towel he used to disguise the ligature marks was most likely resting under Mary's head. With this amount of evidence, Colin was charged with Mary's murder, and the trial was set for October 2003. Because Colin had to wait 2 years for his trial, he was released on bail. As part of his bail conditions, he had to live with his parents, report to the guard station daily, pay a bail bond, and surrender his passport. He lost his job at the bank, and to have an income, he rented out the house he had once shared with Mary. Although Colin was following the rules of his bail, he had other plans in the background. In May 2002, Colin's family reported him missing. A review of the paperwork at Balboa, the detective station, showed that he had not appeared in for 2 days. Essentially, the security guards had failed to properly monitor the situation, and it was unclear whether Colin had actually run away or not. The detective issued an alert, and Colin's car was found at Howth Head, just outside Dublin. The keys were still in the car, and an empty bottle of gin was on the passenger seat. The car was parked neatly, and a window was left slightly open. However, as a formality, an air and sea rescue was launched to search for but surprisingly, no one was found. Alerts were sent out through media. Air and sea ports were notified of Colin's identity, and he was wanted for murder. Interpol were contacted, and in turn, Europol, which tracks people within Europe. For over a year, there was no sign of Colin, and eventually, the detective received a tip-off from a man who was holding in Mallorca, Spain. He was an old school friend of Colin's, and he knew he was wanted for murder. So he made friends with another barman there and asked who he was, and the barman said that's Keen Sweeney from Galway Island. So when the guy got home, he contacted the detective, and they contacted Europol, and Colin was put under surveillance. An arrest warrant was put in place, and the Spanish police went to the bar and arrested him. He was brought to the civil guard station in Madrid, and Colin denied who he was. Fingerprints were taken, and they matched the prints the detective had sent over. Eventually, Colin admitted the truth. The next thing to organize was an extradition to bring Colin back to Ireland. This had never been done before. When the extradition was finally arranged, Detective Murray flew to Madrid to escort Colin home. When Mary spoke to Colin, he told her how he had obtained a passport and made his way all the way to Spain. Colin explained that 7 months before he went missing, he had applied for a passport using the identity of a man he resembled in age and build. Knowing this man did not travel, Colin was successful in obtaining the passport. He then took a train to Belfast, a flight to London, another flight to Barcelona in Spain, and finally a boat to Mallorca Island, Spain. Colin returned to Ireland, and Mary's brother was employed at the airport. He positioned himself at the area where Colin would be arriving. One of the security officers approached Mary's brother and asked, "You're not going to attack him, are you?" And the brother responded, "No, I'm not." The security officer then said, "All right." So Colin and Mary's brother came face to face, and they stared at each other for a moment, and then Colin lowered his head. While Colin was waiting for his trial date in prison this weather, the detective were continuing to gather as much information as they could in preparation for the trial. They needed to find out everything they could about him, especially his past relationships. There were people who still believed that Colin was innocent because they didn't have the full details of who Colin really was. One person that the detective found was a woman who had been in a relationship with Colin before he met Mary. He was so violent and controlling that she left the district to get away from him. She met him at a disco, and for the next 6 months he wooed her, but once he had her, he changed. He controlled every aspect of her life, who she was allowed to talk to and how she was to dress, and he was physically abusive towards her. She ended up pregnant and was terrified to tell him. He hit the roof and told her no way was she having the baby. He brought vodka and aspirin to her one night and tried to force her to take them, so she'd lose the baby. She managed not to take the aspirin, but she did swallow some vodka. At the height of his that night, he kneed her in the stomach, and she lost the baby the next day. On the 12th of April, 2005, Colin appeared for the first day of his trial. All the families were there, the Goff family. The Whalens were sitting there believing Colin was innocent. They had no idea what was coming. They thought the guards were out to get Colin, and that it was all lies. They really did not have a clue who Colin was. The judge asked Colin to stand and asked him the question, "Did you kill Mary Goff?" And he answered guilty. The Whalen family in the gallery were in shock when he answered guilty. Their jaws hit the floor. It took everyone's breath away. The Goff family was so relieved that they wouldn't have to go through the trial, and Mary's brother said he finally did something right. Colin's counsel read out a letter of apology at the sentencing, but we all know it was self-serving. The only thing Colin Whalen was sorry for was that he got caught. Colin Whalen was sentenced to life in prison, where he still is today. He is supported by his English girlfriend, who he met when he was living in Mallorca. She has recently returned to her home in England, so it's easier to visit him. She says she will be with him in the end. Oh, give me strength. Colin Whalen never loved Mary. In fact, he probably hated her. He took her life so he could start a new one and have the money to do it. If you look at his history, he probably hates all women, and they are only there for his use. The Gardaí said when he gets out, which will be soon, he will be a very dangerous individual to any woman he meets. It's 2022 now, and it's been over 21 years since Mary was murdered. She was a beautiful woman, and her death had a massive impact on the community. Because of Ireland being so small, we have these little communities, so when something like this happens, it's remembered for life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Neil and Twistle. In the peaceful town of Hopkinton, Massachusetts, a family story unfolded in a sad and surprising way, sharing a compelling tale that interested the entire nation. This is the story of Neil and Twistle and Rachel Souza, a story of love, lies, and a tragedy that destroyed the belief in a flawless life. Neil and Rachel are a happy couple with a new baby. Neil is from Britain and works in IT, while Rachel is an American mother who takes good care of their daughter. Despite seeming to have it all, they were actually facing some hidden tensions that led to a tragic outcome. Neil and Twistle was born on September 18, 1978, in Worksop, Nottinghamshire, England, to Clifford and Ivan and Twistle. He grew up in a humble household with his younger brother Russell. His father used to work as a miner before becoming a labor advisor, while his mother worked as a cook in a school cafeteria. After finishing high school, Neil went to the University of York to study electronic engineering and business management. While at university, he met Rachel Souza, an American student studying abroad. Rachel, originally from Kingston, Massachusetts, had attended Silver Lake Region High School before moving to Holy Cross College in Worcester. She spent a year at York University, where she met in Twistle while both were on the rowing team. Neil was described as reserved and not very social, but his peers noticed his quiet nature. On the other hand, Rachel was seen as lively and outgoing, and she was popular in the community. Her American background added a special charm to her personality, making her a positive presence on the rowing team. As their relationship deepened, Neil and Twistle and Rachel Souza found themselves increasingly drawn to each other, spending more time together. Benjamin Pryor, a close friend from their college days, later provided testimony about their relationship, describing their interactions as marked by enjoyment and a strong sense of ease, leading observers to perceive them as a genuinely affectionate couple. While Neil worked at a defense technology and security company in Malvern, Worcestershire, Rachel focused on her career in education. She finished her studies in 2002 and started teaching English, drama, and theater studies at St. Augustine's Catholic High School in Reading, showing her dedication to guiding young minds through the arts. Neil jokingly described his job as making bombs and other items. He happily announced his engagement to Rachel, whom he called the most amazing woman. They met through rowing and were deeply connected. Neil was satisfied with his upcoming marriage, despite not being completely happy about living south of the border. In August 2003, the couple got married in Plymouth, UK, and Massachusetts, USA. After their US wedding, they had a reception in the UK in November of the same year. Neil shared the start of their married life in Worcester on a family website he made, sharing memories from their trip to the Mediterranean in Christmas 2004. In April 2005, Neil and Rachel welcomed their daughter Lillian Rose into the world, marking a significant turning point in their lives. This new addition to their family prompted them to decide to relocate to the United States. They initially resided in Carver, Massachusetts, with Rachel's mother Priscilla Matter and stepfather Joseph, until January 12, 2006, when they secured a home of their own in Hopkinton. Their new residence, nestled on a quiet cul-de-sac with only 8 neighbors, offered a tranquil setting just a short distance from the nearest major city. The 5-bedroom colonial-style rental property came with a monthly rent of $1,500, reflecting the upscale nature of their accommodation. Neil struggled to find a job as a computer programmer and IT specialist, which led to financial difficulties and debt. To ease the situation, he started selling PC parts on eBay. However, his business faced issues with undelivered orders and drew attention from eBay's fraud investigator. It was discovered that Neil used multiple accounts with different names. During this period, Neil was also running a website called millionmaker.co.uk, promoting a get-rich-quick scheme for the adult entertainment industry. The site claimed to guarantee a monthly profit of $6,000 within 6 months, but was later shut down. Simultaneously, Neil was actively seeking sexual partners through various online platforms. He frequented websites in pursuit of such relationships. Neil registered on Adult Friend Finder and reached out to multiple women via email, expressing his interest in finding sexual partners. During the investigation, authorities discovered incriminating evidence on Neil's laptop, including content from his online profile indicating his interest in meeting American women of various ages. His profile mentioned a desire to confirm rumors suggesting American women's superiority in bed compared to those from overseas. He expressed a mutual desire for a particular type of relationship, implying a straightforward approach to meeting like-minded individuals. In the weeks leading up to the tragic murders of Rachel and their daughter Lillian, Neil conducted a series of disturbing online searches, including inquiries about how to kill with a knife, interspersed with more mundane searches related to employment, travel, and get-rich-quick schemes. Additionally, during this period, Neil visited his father-in-law, Joe Matarazzo, who was a member of the Old Colony Sportsman's Club in Carver, where Neil had previously stored a .22 caliber revolver and received shooting lessons from Joe. Neil devised a plan to steal a gun from Joe's collection. At their home in Carver, Massachusetts, Neil made a trip to his in-laws' residence, retrieved the weapon from a concealed location in the house, and drove back to Hopkinton with the gun in his possession. Upon returning home, he discreetly concealed the firearm, biding his time for the opportune moment to carry out the tragic acts of violence against his family before taking his own life. On Friday, January 20th, 2006, Neil entered the family's master bedroom, where they had been living for only 10 days. His wife Rachel and their infant daughter Lillian were sleeping in their new four-poster bed. He crept inside and shot 27-year-old Rachel in the head, then proceeded to shoot 9-month-old Lillian, who was lying beside her mother. The bullet passed through Lillian's tiny body and pierced Rachel's left breast. Later that same day, while his in-laws were still at work, he returned to Carver to return the weapon without cleaning it. He later claimed that he had gone shopping at Staples that Friday, found his family dead upon returning home, and then went to Carver to get a pistol to commit suicide. However, he didn't contact emergency services, revealing a pattern of lies to cover his tracks. Upon leaving Carver, Neil drove to Logan Airport in Boston on the evening of January 20th, 2006. He made 2 ATM withdrawals totaling $800, but 3 additional withdrawal attempts for $420 were declined. The following day, Saturday, January 21st, 2006, Neil purchased a one-way ticket to London, carrying no luggage. Around 5 p.m., he boarded a British Airways flight that departed Boston at 8:15 p.m. On that Saturday evening, Neil had invited several neighbors for dinner. Shortly after 7 p.m., Joanna Gatley and her sister Maureen arrived at the home, but found it locked with the lights on inside. Concerned, they tried calling Rachel's mother, who had also planned to visit that day for lunch with her daughter, but had been unable to reach her. Alarmed, they decided to call 911 around 8:30. Police officers arrived at Neil's home to search for any signs of the missing family. Sergeant Michael Sutton described the scene, noting he could see into the bedroom, where there was a large bed in the center of the room that was unmade with all the bedding appearing to be piled up. Other than the disheveled bed, nothing seemed out of place. After their search, the police locked up the house, left, and continued their patrol. Despite the search, the Gatley sisters remained deeply concerned. They were so distressed that they decided to spend the night outside, in their car, waiting for the family's return, despite the cold. They made 3 trips to the gas station bathroom to endure the night while awaiting any news. On the following Sunday morning, the sisters managed to enter the house using the garage door code they obtained from a neighbor the previous night. Inside, they discovered dishes and leftovers in the kitchen, suggesting the family had recently finished a meal. The bathtub still held water, indicating that the couple had bathed their infant daughter. They proceeded to the main bedroom, and then to Lillian's bathroom, where classical music was playing, and finally checked the living room before Rachel's mother and stepfather arrived. After assessing the situation together, they collectively decided it was time to report the family as missing to the Hopkinton Police Department. Sergeant Sutton returned to the Neil residence for a second search. As he entered the basement, he detected a new, unpleasant smell that was not present the day before. Following the odor through the house, he eventually reached the primary bedroom, where he found Rachel and Lillian deceased in the unmade 4-poster bed, covered with clothes. Rachel's arms were stretched over her infant's chest with her feet curled beside her, and both were dressed in pajamas. The autopsy results revealed that Rachel died from a gunshot wound to the head, while Lillian had been shot in the torso. Additionally, Rachel's DNA was found on the gun barrel, while Neil's was discovered on the gun grip. Neil Entwistle, who was 27 years old at the time, was considered only a missing person during this period. Around 36 hours after returning to England, Neil visited his parents, Cliff and Ion. He had been driving around and had spent the previous night at a hotel. During this visit, he disclosed to them that he had discovered the bodies of his wife and daughter. On Monday, January 23, 2006, Neil engaged in a phone conversation with the Hopkinton police. This 2-hour phone call between Neil and Massachusetts State Trooper Robert Manning was recorded and subsequently played in its entirety during the court proceedings. Neil stated that upon discovering the bodies, he was overcome with fear and rushed to be with his family. He recounted to the police, failing to muster the resolve to harm himself with a knife. Neil informed the authorities that he drove the family vehicle to his father-in-law, Joe Matarazzo's residence, to retrieve a .22 LR caliber revolver. He claimed to have found the house locked, leading him to choose to return to England to be with his parents on January 26, 2006. U.S. law enforcement officials traveled to the U.K. to interview Neil the following day, January 27. After consulting with a lawyer at the workshop residence, he chose not to engage with the American detectives at the U.S. Embassy in London, despite his voluntary presence there. Rachel and her daughter Lillian were laid to rest in Evergreen Cemetery in Kingston, Massachusetts, under the surname Souza. They were interred in a single casket, despite around 500 individuals attending the funeral to bid their final farewells. Neil was notably absent from the funeral, and his name was omitted from the proceedings, and not inscribed on their shared headstone during the burial ceremony. Neil sent a single orange rose and a white lily, with a note attached to the ribbon that read, "My orange rose and my lily for always," signed off with Sakoko. Upon his return to the UK, Neil appeared to be resuming a routine life in February 2006, while media attention remained outside his parents' residence in Workshop. He went to Notting Hill for a dinner gathering with his former crew team from York University, followed by a movie outing about a week after the funeral service for Rachel and Lillian, on February 8, 2006. The Middlesex County District Attorney's Office issued an arrest warrant for Neil the following day, on February 9, 2006. Neil was apprehended by the extradition unit of London's Metropolitan Police Service at Royal Oak Station, as he was about to board a train. Upon learning of the impending arrest, among his possessions was a notebook detailing his intention to sell his account to the highest bidder. In the notebook, he expressed affection for his orange rose and lily, referring to his wife as his dearest and closest friend on another page. Additionally, he had drafted 2 letters to the editor seeking to share his perspective on the events. Neil aimed to explain his perspective and communicated with a close friend and confidant to convey his intentions. In one of the letters, he inquired about the potential monetary value associated with exclusive rights for his full account. Ultimately, Neil decided not to challenge the extradition order, and he was transported back to the United States on February 15th. He appeared in Framingham District Court, where he was remanded without bail at Middlesex County Jail in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Following this, on March 28, 2006, Neil was formally charged with 2 counts of murder, as well as illegal possession of a firearm and ammunition. Despite the charges, he entered a plea of not guilty in December 2006, nearly a year after the tragic incident. Authorities at Middlesex County Jail, where Neil was detained, discovered letters he had written to his parents and legal team. These letters indicated that Neil was in a state of depression and suggested he might be contemplating suicide. Consequently, he was transferred to Bridgewater Hospital for psychiatric assessment before being returned to Middlesex County. Forensic psychiatrist Christopher Cordless attributed Neil's behavior to Asperger's syndrome, a view that was supported by Dr. David Holmes. After several delays, the process of selecting jurors for the trial at Middlesex Superior Court began in June 2008. Concerns were raised regarding the high-profile nature of the case and whether Neil would be able to receive a fair trial. The trial for the double murder officially commenced on June 2, 2008, in Woburn, Massachusetts, with Elliot Weinstein leading Neil's legal team. During the trial, Weinstein unsuccessfully attempted to challenge the prosecution's proposal to introduce DNA evidence. Similarly, efforts to suppress other evidence discovered in the family home, due to the absence of a warrant, were also futile. Neil chose not to present any witnesses or testify in his defense throughout the trial. Observers noted his lack of visible emotion during the proceedings. On June 25, 2008, Neil N. Twistle was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, as well as unlawful possession of a firearm and ammunition. The court sentenced him to life imprisonment, without the possibility of parole. Upon leaving the courtroom, Neil was overheard reassuring his loved ones in the gallery, saying, "I'll be all right." Initially, Neil was held at Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center. In August 2008, he fell victim to a deceptive ploy, where he shaved his head in an attempt to seek protection from a white supremacist prison gang. However, instead of receiving protection, the gang threatened his life, stating, "It's a nice gesture on your part, but we're going to kill you." Following this incident, Neil was placed in protective custody, and subsequently in December, he was transferred to Old Colony Correctional Center, a medium-security prison located in Bridgewater, Massachusetts. The Department of Correction confirmed that the transfer was made for Neil's safety, due to credible threats against his life. The tragic deaths of Rachel and her infant daughter left a profound emptiness in the hearts of those who knew and loved them. Their passing serves as a stark reminder of the vibrant lives that were abruptly cut short in the aftermath of this heartbreaking loss. The community came together, providing unwavering support and comfort to the grieving families. Their unity and strength during such adversity demonstrate the remarkable resilience and compassion that resides within humanity. The narrative of Neil Entwistle and Rachel Sousa stands as a poignant reflection of the unseen challenges that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly perfect existences. May the legacy of Rachel and her daughter prompt us to remain vigilant, extend a helping hand to those in distress, and cherish every moment spent with our dear ones. Their story serves as a somber yet powerful call to prioritize empathy, support, and appreciation in our interactions with others.